I had this on,
Perfect. That would have been
given the
perfect.
news today. So
I haven't. Obviously, I know who he is and stuff. I've never spoken with him actually. A lot of those older guys come back around quite a bit, but no, I've never spoken with him. I mean, people speak very highly of him, obviously, but I've never had a chance to meet him.
Welcome back to the House of Rick Built podcast, episode number 76. We're trying out some new things today. Obviously, by the title, you've seen it. We have a big episode up today. A big interview today on this episode. We interviewed Ford Stuen, talked to him about a range of things for a 2-hour-long interview. Also cover some of the things that have happened in the time since we've last talked to you guys up until now. It's been a little bit of time. I kind of forgot how long it's been since we got on the podcast again. But we're also adding a YouTube component to the show. I'm looking forward to this. I think we're going to continue to do this more and more in the future. I would assume at this point on until something changes, every episode, whether it's an interview or otherwise, we will be doing video. Obviously, if people we interview don't want to do video, they don't want to be on video, that's something we can't really control. But the hope is that going forward, we will have more YouTube channel shows like this, where it's just the podcast that we just videoed, and if you want to watch it and throw it up on the TV or whatever, you can watch that. The normal audio only podcast form will also still be available, as it always is, on all of the normal streaming platforms it's been available on. So nothing's really changing there. We're just adding another element to this. There's a lot of other new things we're working on right now. Can't really get into that just yet, but I'm looking at trying to put more maybe audio clips or short show clips that you can watch, little segments on the YouTube channel, along with different forms of content that we might be able to use. So there's a lot of things we're working on. Obviously, we got free time in terms of there's not a lot that we need to talk about right now. We love doing the interviews. The more interviews we can do, we will do, obviously. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of changes that are happening on behind the scenes, and one of those also is going to be the format of the show. It's not going to be a huge change in the format, but I think you're going to see some different little nuanced things that maybe we haven't done before. And obviously, again, we're talking about the off-season form of this podcast, which is kind of dull because there's just not a ton to talk about. And now you're in the middle of a pandemic, if we still are. There's going to be dead periods where there's just nothing to talk about. So we're working on getting everything set up for next year and having it ready to go the way we want to have it ready to go. And I think we're very confident. I can speak for myself. I'm very confident that there will be a lot more new stuff that we haven't done before that we'll be doing going forward into the future. So very excited for all that. We're also very excited, as always, to have our show sponsors, Mortgage Partners Group, back. They were our first sponsor and our only sponsor throughout the entirety of this podcast. We've been with them for about 6 months now. Certainly, for them to put that kind of faith in us was huge, and we're very appreciative of that. All the time they do stuff to help this show grow and to keep the show up on the air. So they've been a huge help. And if you need any help with loan approval, loan appraisal, you're looking for a home loan, these guys are the place to go. Trustworthy, reliable. Know them very personally. Jason Keenan and the rest of his team over at Mortgage Partners Group. Make sure you guys go check them out. Give them a call. I'll give you the phone number here after the theme song. So you'll hear the phone number here in a second. But anyway, thank you as always to them. Make sure you guys go check them out. Tell them that we sent you, and it'll help the show out even more. Really simple way. If you're in the home loan market, you need to get a home loan. If you mention our name, it's just an easy way to help out the show that you guys hopefully love and enjoy listening to. But without further ado, now it's time for episode 76 of the House of Rick Built, starting right now.
Got to get a shot off. It's got to be a three.
Ellis, Mitchell for the tie. Got it!
Oh!
The House of Rick Built podcast with Colin Kessler and Zach Miller.
Speaking of
Conklin leveled Wilcox, and he's down for the count. Driving Evans for Conklin layup. Good whistle foul. Count the basket. You want to play rough? You want to play rough? Let's play. This is Billiken Basketball.
Welcome back to the House of Rickville podcast, brought to you by Mortgage Partners Group, where mortgage solutions are made simple. Give Jason a call at 314-422-0649. Back with episode number 76. I'm your host, as always, Colin Kessler, joined as usual by Zach Miller. Zach, how are you doing?
Live in living color, no less, for episode 76. We're videoing now.
Yeah, this will be interesting. I talked a lot about it in the open to the show. Please let us know what you think of this, because obviously there's going to be a lot of learning curves on my end to make sure that this is done properly and that it looks good and it's entertaining, whatever. And then also make sure that if you do like it, hit the subscribe button and make sure you just keep getting our numbers up there as well. But it'll be interesting. I'm excited to try this.
You know what? I need to do a wardrobe change though, Colin, in honor of our first topic.
Okay, go for it. For those of you not watching on YouTube, you just put on a Kevin Lisch jersey. I believe he did that backwards. Very nice.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know I have it backwards, but you couldn't see the name.
Sure. No, I get it. No, I was giving a color commentary to the people at home. That I guess when I say at home, the people that aren't watching this on YouTube, and explaining what you're doing. I myself have the 23 Kyle Cassidy jersey hanging up behind me. So there's a little color commentary on this. This is gonna be weird.
We're gonna have to work on our
backgrounds.
We're gonna have to work on our backgrounds. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
I have the conference champion banner from 2000.
Yeah, I have a blue bed sheet. So that's what I'm rocking with over here. So Zach brought it up, the first topic of this episode. Obviously, we haven't talked to you guys in a while. A lot of stuff has happened, although really we only have three major topics to talk about. The first being probably, I guess, maybe the second most recent thing that's happened. Kevin Lisch just very recently retired. He finishes, what was it, 11 years overseas?
It was a long damn time.
I think it was 11 years.
Yeah,
overseas.
11. I mean, he graduated in 07. Up until 2019, 20. So
sure.
11, 12 years.
Yeah. So Kevin Lisch retired.
Career.
Oh, unbelievable career, both at St. Louis. Well, really, if you started all off, an unbelievable career, a fantastic career at St. Louis University, and then obviously had a very successful career overseas. I was wondering, Zach, if you had a Kevin Lisch moment that stood out to you personally.
I mean, I know people mentioned today a specific game where he took over. It was the Xavier game where was it Derek Brown? I can't remember for Xavier, scored on a last-second tip-in. But I mean, I think what I'll always remember about Kevin Lisch, the indelible picture in my head, is his bloody face. That picture will always stick with me. But no, Kevin, I think, an absolute class act, a grade A human being. And I think he personified everything it meant to be a Billiken. Yeah.
The story I have is not of a specific Kevin success story moment. My dad happened to know Rusty Lisch through work, and so we were going to a game one night, and we showed up late, and I think I really think this happened maybe like 5 minutes into the game, probably less. And here he comes, Rusty Lisch comes running down the concourse at what is now Enterprise Center, and I'm like a little kid. I'm giddy about the fact I'm meeting Kevin Lisch's dad, like freaking out, trying to talk to him, and Kevin had just fallen flat on his back, and I think hit his head because he was out with a concussion for a few games there. So I'm like stopping him, trying to talk to him, and that's maybe – looking back on it, one of the most uncomfortable moments of my life, knowing that I had just had no feel for the situation whatsoever. So not really a great story, but, something I can laugh at now, I guess. So again, congratulations to Kevin Lisch on a very illustrious career.
An Olympian. He was an Olympian.
An Olympian as well. I forgot about that. I had to throw that in there. Yeah. I mean, just unbelievable run.
MVPs.
And he's probably, I think, if you look at the guys that SLU has sent overseas, I think he has to be maybe the most successful we've seen thus far. Obviously, we've got guys over there that are still playing, but
I would say if you're looking at successful pros in recent memory, that five, you have five guys. Larry Hughes obviously played
Yeah.
in the NBA. You can't have anybody that can top that.
Right.
You had
But I was just talking
Ian
overseas specifically.
No, yes, no, totally. But pros, Ian Vayukas.
Yep.
I mean, Chris Heinrich played forever.
Mhm.
Maybe not a huge career. I would say Brian Conklin, Jordair Jett, and Kevin Lisch.
Yeah. No, I
Dwayne
agree.
Evans too has to be in there as well. He's played. I mean, Kwame. There's
Cody Ellis.
It's hard for me. Yeah. Well, Cody had a few years. He hasn't had the longevity. I love Cody to death. But
No,
the
I
longevity,
know. I'm just saying when you get to this point, you can just start naming all these guys that are having,
Yeah.
and Cody's still having a successful career overseas, maybe not the top five, but yeah. So again, congratulations to Kevin Lisch on, like I said, a very illustrious career from high school through college, all of his years of hard work at St. Louis University. I believe Kevin's senior year was Rick's first year, was it not? Because it was him and Tommy were seniors when Rick came in.
It was either junior or senior year, but I think it was his senior year.
So obviously
That's tough
those
to say,
two, but obviously those two had a tough draw with that. Obviously, you're getting a great coach in Rick Majerus, as I've said, obviously like 5 times here, and I just picked up on that. But you're in a transition period where Rick has to build a program, bring in new recruits. Soderberg's out. Some of his kids aren't coming. So, tough senior year. But Kevin Lisch was the epitome, like you said, I think, of what it means to be a Billiken. The hard work ethic, show up every day, do what you got to do to win, and was one of the great three-point shooters the Billikens have had in at least my recent memory.
I mean, he wasn't just a three-point shooter. The guy was an incredible athlete.
Yeah, I should have just brought that out and said one of the great scorers that the Billikens have had in the last 20 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, once again, congratulations, Kevin Lisch. Fantastic career. Enjoy retirement. Hopefully we can get you on the podcast soon.
Sad to see it happen over an injury, though. I'll say that much. I think it remains to be seen that he could have probably gone another few years, but
it is sad. But I mean, I guess there's only so much you can do with that. I don't know the extent of the seriousness of the injury. I don't know what it exactly came down to. But I'm sure that the amount of time he's spent playing and maybe a desire to, maybe he's coming back to the States. I don't know if he's going to stay overseas and live there. Who knows? So
yeah,
a lot of factors could play in that one. But anyway, field hockey. Field hockey has hired a new coach. This is an interesting recruit for the Billikens. Zach, I know you had something to say about this on Twitter. A little information on the new field hockey coach. And Zach, I want to preface this before I give out the information that, this is a sports team at St. Louis University and in the athletic department that you have talked about before, and kind of the weird way in which you go about recruiting coaches for that and trying to find talented coaches. And it seems like, from the outside looking at least to me, that the field hockey team has not had a terribly great run of success.
I would say that's yeah.
So yeah. So
just tee me up.
I'm getting there. All right. So here's the press release, if you will. St. Louis University Director of Athletics Chris May announced that Zoe Adkins has been named the 13th head coach.
I believe it's Zoe.
Is it Zoe? Okay, Zoe Adkins. I don't know. On here, it's just ZOE without those 2 dots over the top.
Yeah.
So that's why I assumed there was just Zoe. So she comes from this is her second collegiate coaching job. She spent 6 seasons at Franklin Pierce University. 5 of those were as the head coach. And in those 5 seasons, she accumulated a record of 37 and 52. That was 2 seasons with 10 victories. So I guess the point of putting that in there is to say that she maybe had a rough start to her career and then it trended upwards. I don't know. Zach, what does that say to you?
You know what? I think I'll get to the telling part of this, the telling quote, and I believe it's a Chris May quote. We are thrilled to have Zoe leading our field hockey team, May said. It is Chris May. Her values align perfectly with those of the university and our department, and we are confident that she will help us achieve our strategic objectives to educate, compete, and build community. I look forward to working with her as we continue to build and invest in our field hockey program. To me, that is a continuation of the idea that field hockey is a sport at SLU that is just there to take up scholarships. I'm not saying that that's how I like it, but that's the extent of what I take out of this. That the field hockey team is there as a Title IX balancer. That you bring in a coach that hasn't had a winning record as a head coach from a Division II program. I don't even know how you find this coach.
Yeah.
But if this works out, if this works out, I will be shocked.
Well, and hey, maybe they have seen her in action. Maybe they have talked to someone over at Franklin Pierce. Maybe there's some kind of communication where they know that, maybe the record doesn't say it all. But I don't know. I just that's a hard one for you to get around, because I think if you looked at certain statistics and said that she was getting beat specifically here, or her recruiting wasn't perfect, she needed to be more aggressive, or you picked out one little thing and said she could be better here, and this is kind of the reason she hasn't been so great and the results aren't. But it's just you have a sub 500 record, and that's it. I don't know how you explain that as you're going upwards.
The issue is that you're coming from a Division II program. Division II is non-scholarship.
Yeah.
You're moving to a Division I program that is low scholarship. We're talking minuscule scholarships. I think half for, 6 or 7 players on the whole team. So if you can't get it done without scholarships, how are you going to get it done when you have low scholarships and you're jumping up in class?
Yeah, no, it's going to be an interesting thing. And again, I don't know. Field hockey is just not one of those sports at St. Louis University that we hear a lot about. It's just, I don't want to say it's an ignored sport, because it feels like that's a bit harsh. But you know what? And that brings up an interesting conversation that I don't remember when this was. I think it was a month or two ago. You were messaging, or you were tweeting on the account with one of the field hockey players, I think, as well, and talking to her about, some of the stuff that's going on with COVID-19 and the issues, around the canceling of all the spring sports. It's just, there's a lot of issues that came up in that conversation with her as well, that, you don't consider these things. Like with basketball, if something needs to get done, it's going to get done. So
yeah,
she's going to be a little bit up against it in that regard as well. So if she's already starting behind the 8 ball and doesn't quite, have her feet wet yet in college coaching, this could be a disaster pretty quickly.
Yeah, well,
maybe a disaster is a harsh word.
To be honest, you can't be more disastrous than this field hockey program has been for the last decade or two.
Well, it's fair.
They've gone many seasons with 0 wins.
Yeah, it's what do you say? This is going to be an interesting story to follow. That's the best you could say, because right now you just don't know. The numbers would tell you that this is not going to improve. This is not going to achieve what was, as Chris May said, a strategic objective. But I guess if he feels
it depends on what their strategic objective is.
Well, right, he said to educate, which could very well be true. Compete, which okay. I don't.
Depends on your
find
level
that hard to. Right. Yeah, and then build community, which I guess, she could be a very, personable coach, but it's just at the end of the day, if you can't win, I don't know. It just seems like that if you're coming as a coach, you like a coach that can, take care of their players, make sure they're going to class, do stuff like this. You like a coach that can come in and create a unity in the team. But if you can't win games, I don't know.
I'm going to be honest. I've never heard of any sort of academic issues with women's sports at SLU.
Well, I'm just saying though,
they tend to get the best of the best for women's.
Well, as a general rule of thumb, though, those are the things that you'd be talking about with a college coach and the ways you would like to see them succeed. And I still think even if you're checking off 2 out of 3, but one of those 3 isn't winning, it's kind of a problem.
It's tough.
Yeah. But we'll see. Don't want to call a game on this one already and just write it off. Maybe she comes through and surprises us. I would be here for that. Plenty.
I would.
So the next thing on the list, and this is something I think we all were pretty much expecting, Jordan Goodwin and Hassan French are back. I think
I gotta be honest. I was starting to sweat a little bit after my my hand wringing on the whole thing, just telling everybody to just shut up and they'll be back. Like it coming down to the last day was I was worried about looking stupid. Got to be honest.
Yeah, but I mean that's a you thing, right? You have a big mouth. It's okay. We get it. Don't worry. I was just giving you a hard time.
Podcast.
Right, exactly. But I don't know. I don't think I ever really was concerned that they weren't coming back to St. Louis University. I mean, it felt like, again, everything that I think me and you had echoed on this podcast had been said by guys like Chapley. I think Stu Durando even alluded to this. They're leaving, or they're not leaving, but declaring or whatever it was. It still left them eligible to come back to St. Louis University. And all they're really doing is testing the waters and seeing, what do I need to improve on to have a real shot at this next year? So I don't know. It never really concerned me. And I thought, with those two being seniors and the amount of time, effort, and hard work that they've put in to see this program go from where it was when they started here to where it is right now, I just find it so hard to believe that they would want to leave with 1 year left. I mean, finish what you started.
Yeah, no, I get that. I don't think I ever thought it would be an NBA, an NBA decision.
No, but
I thought it would be I thought it could be, a professional. They get a nice offer from overseas, and with coronavirus and the uncertainty surrounding the season, and maybe you take the guaranteed money overseas. You risk injury, and you avoid maybe injuring yourself in your senior year. Maybe you don't want to come back because school isn't exactly your bag, and after 3 years you've had enough.
Sure.
There's a lot of things in there, a lot of moving parts, and it's good to hear that they have confirmed that they are coming back, and hopefully we get to watch them play, whether that be in the arena or on TV this year.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I don't know that anyone was necessarily counting against this. I think everyone was, for the most part, pretty comfortable. I think there was a little bit of a hit the panic button right off the bat, but it felt like people kind of came back down to earth, and we were like, all right, this is what's going on. This is how it's going to be. And for me personally, I had that same confidence, and I also just didn't think about it. Like, if I had sat there and thought about it, I probably would have just thought myself off a ledge, honestly. But yeah. It feels good. It's nice to know that we're going to have that core group back. And obviously, you see guys like John Rothstein, whatever it is. The guy is completely clueless about what's going on around the rest of the world, which is actually kind of nice and delightful because he doesn't tweet anything really like about anything else going around the world. It's just basketball. 24/7, it's always basketball, no matter what is going on. The dude's got news and scoops.
It's an admirable trait.
It is very much right now, especially with the way social media has.
He's like a little child.
I mean, it's he's like an Energizer bunny of positivity.
Child.
Yeah, he's just like he's a little Energizer bunny of positivity, just banging the basketball drum and just bringing us all good news in the darkest of times. So I'm here for that. He also picked the Billikens to finish first in the A-10, which is, I think, the first time we've heard this. What?
No, I was saying.
Okay, I thought you were telling me to hold up there. No, yeah, they were picked first in Rothstein's A-10 prediction for the season. His starting five is suspect at best, but at the end of the day, I think this is officially the first time the Billikens have been picked number one for this season. So we're starting to see that buzz already. I think, being realistic, it's going to go Slew and Richmond back and forth for most people.
His pick for the starting lineup is kind of like a college hoops video game.
Yeah.
Starting lineup, like the default.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like what outsiders would see, or how you would make their ratings in the game.
Yeah. Well, it just feels like it just doesn't take into account, even though he's tweeted about it plenty, it just feels like it doesn't take into account the fact that Fred Thatch was hurt for all of last season, or was dealing with, whatever he was dealing with. And we really haven't heard much in the way of, what his condition is for this season and what, he's feeling like. Obviously things were getting better at the end of last season. It seemed like, he was destined to come back, and then something happened and kind of upset the apple cart. And, we were kind of sitting there waiting to see if he's going to be healthy or not again. So it feels like that was, Rothstein just didn't take that into account at all, which is fine. I mean, not trying to complain too much about the fact that we got picked number 1. That's great. Doesn't really mean anything. We've been picked number 1 before, and we saw how that went just 2 seasons ago. So nice to hear, nice to see. But it's just it really, at this point in the year, especially with everything that's happened and the uncertainty that surrounds everything, it is just kind of worthless. It's nice to hear. It's fun to talk about, but what does it really mean? I mean, not really much, I guess. But that led me to something else I wanted to ask you, Zach. What do you think the chances are that we play in Orlando in November?
I think it's, if we're playing ball, we're playing in Orlando. Florida's Florida. I know that a lot of these tournaments around the country are set up to where they are planning on full steam ahead with limited to less attendance.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like because Disney World's also just opened up, and I believe that this Orlando tournament is on Disney property. I feel like that's a good sign when it comes to the chances of getting fans in there. So I am excited about that. I'm very hopeful because that's going to be so exciting to watch that this year. Hopefully we can find a way to get down there and watch that in person if it does happen. That would be an absolute blast. And so many big names in that tournament.
We talk about whether or not things are moving forward a lot lately with coronavirus. And I'll tell you what is moving forward, and that is the mortgage industry and the home buying process. People are still buying homes, and Mortgage Partners Group is still active. They're working through this. And if you're in the market for a home loan, make sure your first call is to Jason Keenan over at Mortgage Partners Group. He's been in the business since '97, longer than you've been alive, Colin.
Yep.
And he'll provide you with all the facts and options to make your loan application process as easy as possible. So give him a call at 314-422-0649.
All right. Well, I think that's a good time now to enter into the Ford Stuen interview. We have a lot of questions for him, a lot of answers we want to try to get out of him, and hopefully this continues to give you guys a reprieve from what is the world right now. Here we go. Our interview with Ford Stuen starting right now.
Welcome back, Billiken fans. This is a watershed moment for the podcast. We have assistant men's basketball coach at St. Louis University, Ford Stuen. He's joining the podcast. Welcome, Coach Stuen.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Like I said, I had a chance to listen to your podcast with being Cardi and was intrigued by it, and I'm glad to be on here. Glad to be on here with two prestigious individuals as yourself.
Wow, that might be the nicest thing
now nobody
about
can.
us.
Now nobody can trust a thing that you say the rest of the podcast.
Yeah.
You're like
it's all fluff.
It's like
All
Willy
your credibility
Wonka
right off the bat.
falling. It's like Willy Wonka falling at the beginning of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. You don't know if he's telling the truth or not the rest of the movie. But yeah, it's great to have you on. We're really excited to get your perspective on things and kind of get some insights for the hardcore fans out there. I know hardcore fans will listen to the coaches show, and I always kind of try to remind them, like, it's not for us. That's for the people who happen to be listening to 101 on the ride home.
Right. No doubt. I've had some time on my hands, and like I said, glad to be on and hopefully shed some light on the program and answer some questions as much as possible, and kind of give you an idea kind of how we work and operate, just from a standpoint internally. I know there's it's good to see passionate fans, like I said, listening to the podcast and just hearing different eras. And again, we're going on year 5 here, but kind of in a place that still learning a lot about St. Louis, about the program, kind of, just now sinking our feet into the sand a little bit and trying to make it last here. And so, like I said, I'm open to all questions, whatnot. I'll share what I can, and hopefully we get somewhere. I'm sure there'll be good conversation, but no, I'm excited, guys.
I want to hit you with the hard hitting question first.
Yeah.
Where do you see this season going, considering the uncertainty that is the current coronavirus crisis?
You know, sitting and talking with a number of different coaches just about what is to come. Nobody can truly predict the things that are ahead of us. I think there's going to have to be an extreme amount of adaptability from our staff as well as our players, and just making the most out of every single situation and every moment we get from the time we get back here on campus as a group, and get our new guys implemented. I couldn't be more excited for this group of guys who is a mixture of veterans along with younger guys. But I think the way last year ended kind of left a lot of teams kind of high and dry. I think there's a certain level of hunger that these guys have because they weren't able to finish what they started a little bit as far as playing well, having ups and downs, but finishing strong. I think that showed maturity. I think it showed the type of guys we've got. I think that when you look back on it and reflect and really sit and let it sink in, I think personally our progression over the season was something that I think we saw as coaches in November and December, and we knew what would come, and we navigated through a lot of like I said, ups and downs. In my personal opinion, I feel like we overachieved. I don't think anybody quite expected that some of the guys would step up in the manner that they did, and end up 23-8 in a year following the NCAA tournament where you lose a lot of talent in Javon and Tremaine and DJ. And so I think these guys are hungry. I think not just here, but everywhere, everybody has a different appreciation for what we're doing, for just the day in and day out feel of being in a locker room, being around guys, waking up every day and having something to attack day in and day out. And so I think this group will come back hungry. I think they're the type of guys, they've been away from each other so long and they are so close that they'll come back. But again, to answer your question directly, there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to have to adapt to. And I don't think anybody knows what that looks like. I think to even speculate on that, we do it as a staff, and we'll get off on, multiple hours Zoom conversations and just start in with this scenario, that scenario. And you have to kind of stop and say, look, you can play devil's advocate with this thing all day. You can throw a scenario at me and I can throw a scenario at you and say, what if somebody gets it? What if something, I think there's a lot of people talking about, oh, well, if somebody gets it, we can't freak out. Nobody's talked about, and I know it's not a virus that's affected the younger generation as much, but heaven forbid, somebody pass away or lose their life or something, and it just changes everything. And so we have to educate our guys as well as ourselves and proceed with precaution. But again, at a certain point, I don't think there's ever going to be a point to where you're just not worried about it, or, there is going to be risk involved, and moving forward and getting our guys back here and getting them on campus and playing games, whether that's football, NBA, basketball, whatever it is, there's risk involved, and you're, basically accepting that risk and knowing that, hey, this very well could happen. And if it does, how are we going to, and so you got to have a plan in place, but there's only so much you can do with it. Kids are kids and they're going to move around. Things are going to happen. I think that's one thing that our leadership here has done so well is move with caution. And I think having football helps us or not having football helps us transition a little slower back into it, where a lot of schools are kind of pushing it. But again, I don't know if anybody knows what it looks like. Road swings are going to be big, I think, from a financial standpoint. I know there's a lot of talk about, the road swings going out, playing 2, possibly even 3 games in a row back to back. And so that takes a special group. And again, it starts at the top, and it starts with us and being able to adapt and get and kind of going into a rabbit hole with these guys. And then it takes leadership, from Jordan and Hassan and Javonte, these seniors, and especially Jordan and Hassan, who have been around and kind of leading these guys. And like I said, adaptability and just, one day at a time, because I don't think we'll know what it looks like truly. November may not look like January, and January is probably not going to look like March. So our first step is getting these guys back and getting them back in some structure and kind of easing back into this thing. But I think we're all ready for it.
What was the education process? I guess, and I don't want to say education because they're smart young men, but what was the process of kind of getting them as they left Brooklyn, right? And you go into this coronavirus lockdown, this quarantine. What was the process of, kind of talking to these guys and explaining the importance of staying, healthy and making sure you're
Yeah.
not taking these risks and with your health and whatnot?
Looking back now, there's a whole different level of education that we all, probably should have had and probably should have proceeded with precaution. It's funny looking back because during that time, myself and Ray Giacoletti both hopped a plane the day prior to go to New York and scout Bonnie's and George Mason, or no, I'm sorry, St. Joe's and George Mason. And so we're there prior to the team coming, and they came that day, practiced that morning, and came that day 2 days before we would have played on Friday. So when we got there, we were kind of moving around. We got out in the city. I ran, over to Manhattan and back, and then we went and ate, and then we went to the game and walked back from the hotel. And looking back on these things, we had no idea, and fast forward or backtrack 2 weeks before that. It was funny. We were at George Mason, and I made a comment, to the staff in the film room. I said, we were just talking about just all kinds of things. We were on a road swing and killing some time down there, all just talking. I'm like, the thing fast tracked so fast. I said, what if there's imagine a world where we don't play an NCAA tournament? And at that time, I don't think anybody thought, oh, no A-10 tournament, but I thought there was starting to be some talk. And then within the matter of 2 weeks, and then even faster, within the matter of about 3 or 4 days, you go from thinking, okay, we're going to go up here and try to win this thing, to all of a sudden, I mean, within 24, 48 hours of us arriving in New York, I'm like, you could just tell the vibe, too many things. And then once the team got there, I think everything started to just fall like dominoes. I think the different conferences were all playing on each other. And once one did it, the next did it. And then that night, when the Rudy Gobert thing happened, I remember laying in my hotel room, and Coach had called me, and we were just talking about it. Did you just see this and that? And as soon as that happened, you just knew that everything was going to change. And so the next morning we go practice, we start practice, we walk in, and as coaches, we all kind of knew. We had heard the Big East talking, and Chris May was in meetings all morning and whatnot. And we started practice, got about 30 minutes, 45 minutes into it, and Chris walked in, called Coach over, and then you could tell that was it. And just that emotion, I think, for everybody, but for these guys who had worked so hard was tough. And I've been vocal about that with different people. It's tough for everybody, unless you were having a bad season, you probably didn't. But still, there's still that level of energy. That's what you're trying to get to. That's the pinnacle. That's, especially with the way we were playing. I don't think there was a doubt in anybody's mind in our program that we had a good chance to at least get to Saturday and play Dayton and throw it up and see what happens. I know there was nobody that wanted another shot at them worse than we did. And so I think all those emotions, and then, you're processing, and then, fast track to trying to get back here to St. Louis, and Chris May did a great job, getting us a plane. And but still, to answer your question, getting back to it, at that time, nobody really knew. We weren't doing – we had hand sanitizer. That was the extent of it. But we weren't masks, and we weren't like anything. Now, and what's crazy, that following those few days, Coach Giacoletti, Ray Giacoletti, he puts a mask on, was feeling terrible following that, and was sick for a few days. I don't know if he ever got tested for it or not. I think he did. I don't think he had it. And then Coach Tate, actually, for 2 weeks following that, again, because New York was like a melting pot for it. And so, then you start playing this game. I got back, and I'd lay in bed at night, and, I think you stress yourself out. I'd be like, oh, I'm having trouble breathing. I think I've got this thing. I'd tell my fiance, and so then there's just that level of freaking out. Nobody truly knows what it was. Now, looking back, you have a different idea of what it was. But at that time, I mean, we've all remained cautious. But, I mean, for 3 weeks, nobody moved. I know I didn't, just for the simple fact, like I told you guys, I'm diabetic. I was one of those that were more susceptible to something happening. And so the unknown was everything. But we all dispersed fast. We got back here. The guys got home. Everybody, went to their different corners of the country and laid low for a while.
Yeah. So you talk about everyone being kind of spread out across the country. What has your communication been like with everyone involved in, the team, the coaching staff? Obviously, you guys are doing Zoom meetings and stuff like that. And I'm going to add on to this. Can you also give us an update on where Gibson Jimerson and Fred Thatch are health-wise and what they're doing rehab-wise over the summer?
Yeah. When we got back, we were we got to the airport at Teterboro, and we were in the FBO, and I remember Janet coming over, and myself and Coach Ford, Coach Tate, and Coach Baylor were kind of in the little coffee section area in the FBO, and I remember Janet coming over and kind of talking about, hey, we're going to have to, get these guys back, make sure they have their books, different things like that. And I'm not going to lie, we as coaches are like, oh boy, like, what is this going to look like from an academic standpoint? I'm like, it's hard enough to get a group of 15 guys, and they're great guys, but academics are tough enough when you got them around you, much less when they get to their home environments, and they've all got different home environments and they've got here and different moving pieces and trying to get them on Zooms and anything. And at that moment, we were like, I don't know how this is going to go. But we were also, optimistic from the standpoint of, at that time, professors, everybody was going through it. So people were going to, be a little more lenient and hopefully. And so we started to switch our mind frame from that to, I know we have different academic teams. And I told all the guys on my team, I'm like, try to switch your mind frame from this being a burden. And I know it is when you're home and you're doing, but at the same time, you don't have a lot going on now, to let me get ahead here. Let me boost my GPA. Because people are going to help you. They're going to give you a little more time, and then we ultimately ended up going pass fail and different things with the university, which nobody actually used. But nonetheless, at that time, we didn't know how it was going to go. And looking back, I can't say enough about our guys. I remember about a week after we get on our first Zoom, and I was kind of like, I don't know how this is going to go. There's no way all these guys are going to be on here, this, and this. And at that point, they all got on, and it was refreshing. It was just so funny. I remember that first Zoom, and everybody's cracking up, laughing. Again, we're so many unknowns. We don't know if we're about to be out of college basketball for 6 months or a year, or, we may be back in a month at that point. And so all the unknowns, but just getting everybody back safe and making sure that everybody was, like I said, safe. But from that point on, staying on top of academics was a crucial thing for us, obviously. And these guys did an unbelievable job, 10 times better than I would have ever dreamed. And that's not to say that they weren't capable or anything. It's just, in these times for that to be on the forefront, especially with guys who are prominent figures within their family structure, and everybody's family structure on this team is different, but these are guys that, may be the man of the household, they may be whatever, and to come back and may feel a need to, take care of their family. They may have, elderly family members that are sick or that are going through that you got to, be careful around, all these different things. And so I commend them for that. And then the communication, I think Coach has done an unbelievable job of, as a program, just staying on the same page and getting everybody talking in and out. We've Zoomed every single week. We've had a ton of Zooms with the coaches, every week, 2 to 3. We have, as a coaching staff, have stayed in touch and gone back and scouted games. And there's not a whole lot you can do right now. We were supposed to be out recruiting and different things. We've missed a lot of that. But again, I go back to the most exciting piece for me is we return an entire team. I can't imagine, and I've got friends in the business with, one of my best friends, Phil Forte at Sam Houston State. They've got 8 newcomers, and we just laugh about the idea of trying to get these guys back, and they probably won't come back till August, and trying to put in a system and stuff. It's like, it's almost a positive for us, to be honest with you. A lot of these other teams who maybe in the A-10 or wherever around the country got a lot of new guys that got to come in and implement a system. Summer has become the time you do that. So being on communication, obviously we got some new pieces to implement, but the core group of our team is returning. So that's a positive. As far as Gibson and Fred, I think they're both moving along. Fred's had a funky deal, and I'll be honest with you. That's one of those things. I'm a person when I don't know every, thing there is to know about something, I don't speak on it too much. And that's not to say I haven't been on the forefront of listening or talking to our trainers, but that's been such an up and down experience. And for me to get into the logistics of it would be, it wouldn't be right for me because I don't truly know what I'm talking about. And I'll be honest with you, I don't even truly know if there is a full understanding of what was going on with him. I know there was a lot of speculation about different things, but it was something internally with him that we saw happen going back as a staff. Crazy deal. I think it might have started Seton Hall, but there was a few plays in a game, and we spent 5 hours after Seton Hall in the office. And I remember telling Coach Tate and Coach Giacoletti, something's not right with him. So you can watch him, and that play right there is not Fred Thatch. That play not, and it was the craziest thing. Fast forward a couple more days. I don't know if he played another game. I can't remember. It's all foggy. But fast forward, and he comes to us and's like, I don't feel like myself, kind of getting emotional about it. He just didn't feel like himself, and his legs were gone and whatnot. And some things that happened in practice during a conditioning deal with his back and just different things. And so it was a rough year for him, and to not be, for such a competitor he is, to lose out on a year like that. But Fred's Fred. Fred is such a focal point of this program and this team from a standpoint of he's about all the right things. He does everything the right way in the classroom, carries himself the right way. Fred Thatch is going to make some of himself, whether it's on the court or off the court. I've always said that. But it's been a tough go. Hopefully he gets that year back. But I think all signs are pointing in the right direction. We'll ease back into it. Obviously, you want to proceed with precaution because, again, I don't know the medical pieces of it. I want to say maybe something about his iron levels and different things, and they want to make sure his heart. They wanted to be sure just because you don't know. You throw him back out there. Then he was practicing for a little while, but he had minute restrictions, and there was a lot of back and forth. We didn't understand how can you practice, but you can't play. If you can practice 30 minutes, you can play 5 or 10. At that point, he could have helped us. But then it got to a point in the season where we're like, it's not worth it. The future for him is more important, and it wouldn't be fair to him. And so just making sure he was at a place. But I do. He's been back, doing some things, back in Sykeston, and I think he'll be ready to roll. So that all signs point to that. So that's good. And like I said, he just adds such a different dynamic to our team. So he's got that dog in him. But Gibson, same thing. Gibson's not going to stay down very long. Gibson's going to be in that gym, and he's back. I talk to him every few days and talked to him earlier, and he's itching to get back, like they all are. They're all dying to get back here. But no, he'll be ready to roll. Gibson will be ready. It was one of those things. You talk about a tough moment, and the crazy part about it, we're still waiting the waiver process, but or the red shirt, whatever, submitting that. But he was right on the threshold of games allowed, and so had he played one more crazy funky deal, he went and just went for a ball and ended up in the stands in practice, didn't think anything of it, just a foot thing. And after x-rays, it was more important for his future that he had that surgery. Could he maybe have toughed it out, he thought, but that was rough for him, to a kid that's playing well. And we knew, when that happened, I remember we got the news the next day. We played a game, and it may have been Maryville or somewhere, was first game.
I think it was Maryville.
We got the news before the game, but waited till after the game to tell him. And I came out of the coach's locker room and grabbed him. Him and I have become very close, and came up to the office, and he's obviously just distraught and trying to, again, turn a negative into a positive. I said, look, these things happen. You will have a different appreciation. And he had suffered an injury in high school that allowed him to be recruited and actually go to Montbird, and it worked out. And now looking back, like I told him, 6 months from now, Gibson, we're going to have a conversation, and you'll look back and be like, wow, hopefully you got another year, and hopefully he gets that back, and he's a freshman. He gets 4 years at this thing again. And so I said, I know it's not ideal. Nobody would choose for this to happen, but you got to try to, take your time. And so there was a process there where they went with the doctors. His family came in and different things, and it was worth him getting the surgery. There was just too many. It was something that was going to happen. They told him at some point or another. Very similar to kind of like Elliot Welmer situation. Not as bad. Obviously, Elliot hurt his a lot, but it was one of those things that it had to be done, and thank goodness that it happened under the threshold of games. And obviously that's an exciting thing for us going into next year. I mean, you talk about what it could have helped us do. But that was a pivotal point for us as a team because, and we'll probably get into all that later, but we had to reinvent ourselves. And it sounds crazy because he's not a double-digit a game guy or anything. He sneak up, get you 14, 15, but as a freshman. But what he did offensively from a schematic standpoint was I knew sitting here in my office talking to him like, I'm worried about him. I want to make sure he's good. But I kind of, came out of that and was just like, oh, boy. Like I at that point, I was not gonna lie, a little bit scared because I knew what he did for us from a standpoint coming off the bench and spreading things out for some guys that needed some space.
You mentioned listening to the Biancardi interview, and it's funny that Biancardi was the interview you listened to because he was an assistant known for his suit fashion, and you've been known to rock a 3-piece suit during games. Tell us about your fashion choices there.
Yeah, I've always, I got no shame in it. I'm from Kentucky, but I'm the least Kentucky person you'll ever meet. That's where I'm born and raised. Love it to death. Family's still there, 2.5 hours away, Henderson, Kentucky. But I've never been that person. I've always, and I actually, when I graduated high school, I went to IMG Academy for a year in Florida. And I got outside of Kentucky, and I sorry, let me put this on vibrate. And when I got down there, it opened up a whole new world, and obviously ended up going to Oklahoma State. So that's a different. It's not fashion capital of the world by any means, but that I think that's where it kind of rooted. I've always enjoyed fashion from a sense of like. I don't know, from a suit standpoint, like I really, really enjoy suits. I don't know why. I'll wear them to, dinner dates with my fiance or whatever it is. And I'm in one so much now that I don't wear them near as much, but got into them. And then when I got into coaching, just kind of took off, and I'll buy a few a year and then, here and there, and have some people, make some for me, just different places. And I enjoy it. I don't know. It's something in me, like I said, no shame, but I don't know where it comes from. I couldn't answer that, but like I used to watch Suits, Harvey Specter, all those guys, the Don Drapers of the world and whatnot. And so
the movie Taken, perhaps.
Oh,
or
yeah,
not Taken. Takers. I'm sorry.
Takers. Yeah, wrong movie,
Takers.
Takers,
Yeah.
The list goes on, Wolf of Wall Street and the suits in there. I love it. I've actually got books. I'm into coffee table books at my house, and I've got books about suits and just the history of them. And yeah, I'm very, very into it. And I think that's where it comes. It's just my chance to kind of, express myself a little bit. And I go back and forth. I'll be honest with you. I go through phases. I'll be over, my place here in St. Louis. I love Suit Supply. And it's not crazy expensive. I've got,
sponsor the
you can
pod,
get a
Suit
really
Supply.
good, you can get a really good, shout out my man Todd, Dre, and Brian over there. Go check them out if you're listening to this. But they take care of me, and like I said, they really nice suits for not unreasonable prices. That's what Chris May's got a running joke with me about, Mr. Big Bucks with the suits. I'm like, man, I promise you my suits are half of what worth yours. I just get them to fit me right, and so I send him over there. But I'm big on just the approach. I think there's everybody's different. That's something that I take pride in from a standpoint of like I'm big on the image and how you carry yourself and what it brings, and I just think dressing well and dressing proper and different things, it adds a different level of how people react to you, not from a conceited standpoint or anything like that, just from a standpoint of I like to carry myself with it. But I go through the double breast. I know he wore the double breast that I heard him say. I've got a couple of those. I like the 3-piece. I've gotten into ties. I enjoy switching the tie game up. I try to stay blue when we go on the road. I'll venture out into some browns, but never go anything too crazy. But no, I enjoy it. I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna pull out some. Like I said, I get a few from here and there every year. I actually, funny story, when I went recruiting in Europe, I came back with quite a few suits. I finished my last leg. My last leg was in Paris, and ended up meeting a guy over there who I've stayed in touch with, and long story short. But anyways, picked up a few from over there. So it's I got to chill out a little bit. My fiance isn't happy about the racks to suits in our house, but I enjoy it, so she'll let me splurge a little bit on it.
Well, I've got two more. I don't know why fashion was the big topic that I had thought of, but
It's funny.
you're
I appreciate it.
no.
Glad to know somebody's paying attention.
Well, no. So I follow you on Instagram, and your shoe collection is also insane. And I get mad online the same way I get about your shoe collection not having any in my size, as I get mad about like going on like a Groupon for something that's college, like and not seeing SLU represent. That's how like annoyed I get whenever you're like, yeah, go look, all these shoes here are the size. I'm like, no.
If I had $1, I'm telling you, man, and I wish my fiance was here, because she actually made me last year. She said for every box of shoes that shows up on our front porch, she's literally giving 5 away. And I'll never forget, I had a pair show up, and she said, that's 5. And so at that point, she literally made me start selling them, because, guys, it is, and I tell everybody this, and I just haven't had enough time. I try to, but it's a process to sell them or give them away or whatever, finding the right people with the right but it's absurd. And to be honest with you, that's something that started at a young age, probably back in high school, and then you go through college, and you've got your little, college money, getting checks and different things, and you go spend it on shoes. But then when we got here, and when I got into coaching, we actually have Nike contracts. So not only do you get shoes through SLU and through what we do as a program, we as coaches all have individual Nike allotments, meaning I have so much money per year that I can go on this website and log in, and that money is allocated to me. And if I don't spend it, it doesn't roll over.
Nike Elite, right?
Yeah, Nike Elite. Yeah. And so that's where, again, if I don't spend it, so I've started spending it on other people, but now that's a real issue. The suits is kind of like the grown up. I've morphed into that kind of being obviously a lot more expensive than shoes, but I was trying to keep up, when I was in high school and college, and, Jordans are coming out, and then I've got some Yeezys that I got, my best friend, Marcus Smart, was with Adidas for a while. And so I got some through him, and I've got some shoes that are collectors. I've got a pair of Nike Air Yeezys, the black ones that are, I got them. I did not pay a resale price for them by any means. I got them through a connection and traded some pairs, and now they're worth, oh gosh, I don't even know what. But again, it's funny. I just moved. We bought a house out in Chesterfield, and when I was moving, they're all on racks. And when I got them to the house, I just put them down in the garage, and for days when we're moving, the garage door's open, and it's already become a running joke about the people that we've met in our neighborhood. The neighbors are like, they're like, all these little girls will walk by and be like, have you seen their shoes? And I guess one of them owns a shoe store or something. And I've now moved them to the basement. But it's funny you bring that up, because I have more people talk about that. And as you've seen on my Instagram, I'm trying to get rid of them. Now I've gone all neutral, white, blacks, and grays, and I end up wearing the same pair all the time. Like I'm in Nike Air Max 1s or 97s or 95s, like the old school, just Air Max. No more Jordans, no more any of that. I'm kind of past that phase, but that obsession's now morphed a little bit into suits. But I still have a few boxes a month come in from Nike, so it's a problem.
You started on staff with Travis as the director of basketball operations here at SLU. Yeah. And again, fashion, I'm obsessed. First of all, you saw that I had the Kevin Lisch jersey.
Yeah.
I am patently obsessed with Nike SLU gear, just obsessed. But you guys have had some really sick gear since, Travis arrived. Is that something that you are able to use as, a recruiting tool? Like, oh, this is what we get from Nike. It goes along with the uniforms as well.
Yeah. So funny you bring that up. And again, I'm glad. It's always good to hear when people notice those things, because we're in an age, and I'm a young guy coming out of college, 4 years ago. When we got here, he gave me complete control of that. And I don't know if there's a lot of things that I wear and a lot of things that we probably get for our guys that he's never going to wear. He's still old school. He likes the old baggy sweatpants and the big polo. He wears the same stuff. Drives me nuts. And I'll say something to him sometimes. I'm like, you're wearing that polo that I got. We when we first got here, there was nothing. When I say nothing, there was just not much. And for whatever reason, I don't know where it went or what. I don't think there was a whole lot to begin with. And just a different transitional period. But anyway, So they let us go out to Golf Galaxy or somewhere and pick up a bunch of them on the P card, different polos. Anyways, he still wears these same polos from 5 years ago, and you'd be surprised how much they change. But he likes what he likes, whatever. But me, that's another thing, is the gear. To put that in perspective of where we're at as a program, as a culture of basketball is over the last 5 to 10 years, kids have become, I'm not going to say that's their main focus, but it's become such a prominent thing in our sport. And I think it starts at a young age with this new generation of social media, playing for shoe companies, the EYBL, what they've done, seeing these NBA athletes, what they're wearing. And again, everything is plastered everywhere, fashion and all these things. And so it's a different generation than it was 10 years ago. And so when I got here, when we got here and he gave me control of that, that's something I took a lot of pride in, kind of as ops of like, I know what these guys want. And make no mistake about it, we are in an era in college basketball to where it matters. I mean, I used to talk about it with my teammates all the time at Oklahoma State. You're crazy to think that kids don't. I'm not going to say it's the only reason, by no means, but we still laugh. Me and some of my friends that are younger in the business, we still laugh to this day about how much it can sway or affect just a school being Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, whatever it is. And so I took pride in that, was going to make sure that our guys get – and Coach has always been big on that. Coach has always been big on, if there's anything ever that these guys need, we're going to get it. And so piggybacking on that and taking control, and that goes back to the administration, what they were willing to do by hiring Coach in a lot of different ways of like, do what you got to do. All these things are limbs of a program that all matter. The way you travel, where you eat, the meals you have, the money, the cost of attendance that these guys are getting, checks, the gear they wear. Everybody sees this. You can't hide. And so I'm passionate on it. I'm a big believer in it because not only do I enjoy it and want these guys to look good and all these things, they know what's going on at Mizzou. They know what's going on at Illinois. They know what got their friends at Kentucky or wherever they are. And that's not to say that we're going to be able to fully keep up, but I'll have, coaches from those universities and stuff like that, because when you're at a football school, they kind of tell you what you can get. And that's the best thing about us is I can choose what we get. And so I can go out and get these guys Nike Tech suits. And so, our coaches, everything. And so it's been a big piece, but it goes a little bit along with, the program and as a whole. 5 minutes or whenever.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll count it down. Whenever I clap, you can go. All right. 3, 2, 1.
Okay. Sorry. Had a little mishap there with the Zoom. Anyways, no, again, I'm passionate about that because we're in an area where the game is changing so much, from kids being able to transfer and all the things that are on the horizon for college basketball in general. It's prominent, and we use the term, you got to recruit your own players. And that's everybody talks about recruiting, and yes, you got to go out and get more players for the program, and the future is important. But if you don't take care of now and the relationships you build and do things, and so our kind of goal as a program, and one thing Coach is big on, and when we recruit guys is, at the end of the day, when you play here for 4 years and you go on, we don't want you to look back and there be anything that you said you didn't get, from the way we work out, to the gear you get, to the way we travel, to the experiences, to all the things that we can control outside of winning and losing games. Is we don't want anybody to walk across that stage and graduate and look back and say, you know what, I should have gone here because they, and nobody's going to say, oh, I should have gone here because the gear or that, but all of it plays a role. And exactly what you're saying is, make no mistake, you only know what you see. So again, me, and this is kind of me being a younger mind thinking about it, and some people would argue that I may care about it too much or whatever it is. But to me, all I know is what I see. So I don't know what Kentucky's doing. I don't know what Florida's doing. I don't know what Tennessee. I only know what I see. So what I see on social media, what I see on TV for the 2 hours that are on there, if you want to try to look up pictures or whatever, I don't know anything about those programs. All I know is what I see. So if you can control what you see, and that goes back to little things like the suits and things like that, is again, it all creates a perception of what you have as a program, as things. So again, for kids that are sitting at home and they see us come out in, our black jerseys or, different jerseys every game on national TV and these things, some people would argue it doesn't matter. But to this new generation, in my personal opinion, and that's where he's been so adaptable. And I think what has prolonged his career and the success he has is because he's gone from an era of playing for Pitino and everything is so cut and dry and everything's old school. We're working, we're this and that. To he's been able to adapt to these things and listen to people, so not just myself, but other people that have been around about, hey, this is the way it's going. This is the way things are going to happen. And I'm a big believer, if you don't get on board with these things, you may have a little success here and there, but you will never sustain it. And I'm not just talking gear. I'm talking relationships. I'm talking, all these things. There's a lot of, and I'm all for old school approach. I think there's a lot of things traditionally, that need to be going on during your program from a disciplinary standpoint, different things. But again, if you don't get with the times and build relationships with your players, there's no, it's no more of the dictatorship mentality of, oh, this is how you're going to, no, it's the players, for lack of a better word, have a lot more control, have a lot more, a lot more options, whether they're being recruited or whether they're here. And that's not going anywhere. That is changing. So whether you like it or not, you got to morph, with the game a little bit. And so that's one thing I think he's done an unbelievable job. And again, going back to Chris May and what he has committed, when Coach got here, there was a big, a lot of talk coming in about VCU, Dayton, Rhode Island at that time about the success that these programs were having. And again, these are all my personal beliefs. The two correlate. And what I mean by the two is if you want to win like this group of schools that you're saying you want to win like, then you got to do all the things financially, spending, the work, all these things that you don't get this without this. So my point is, I'm not saying that it's all about money. It's not all about financial. Again, there's a lot of schools spending a lot of money not winning games. But I don't think you get here with at least, not today, with at least taking the level of your commitment from an administration. And you can only do what you can do. Again, there's a lot of programs that are winning with less. I'm not saying that. But to give yourself the best chance, they all correlate from the way you pay your coach, your head coach, to your staff, to the way there's a lot of things that incentivize, kids these days and different things that, again, they all go together. So if you want to win like VCU and Dayton, what are they doing? Well, there's some things that are going to cost, and hopefully, the two match and you see some success. But again, you I think from a program standpoint, you gotta really lay out what are your standards. If you're certain schools in this league, it may be okay to try to finish top 5. That's going to be, you're shooting for that every year. That'd be a great year. But at SLU, that's not we're trying to, win the A-10. We're trying to make it, and not just for 1 year, consistently. And there's no reason. And that's why I say Chris May's done an unbelievable job of the resources that go into this and what it takes. They've poured a lot into it. And hopefully we're holding up our end of the bargain and trying to win some games.
So one of the things is someone does a donut outside of my window, which is fantastic. One of the things that I wanted to kind of rewind on and talk about in your life is the fact that you grew up with Travis Ford as your uncle. What is it like growing up with him in your family? I mean, he screams to me like the type of guy that when you go to family gatherings, the only thing he's talking about is basketball. He's sitting in front of the TV at Thanksgiving. He's watching any basketball games he can get a hold of. Was he just that kind of basketball crazy? And as we always ask on this podcast, are there any good Travis Ford stories from your childhood?
So that's a good question, and it's one that I don't directly get asked a lot, but there's a lot of correlation, obviously, between the two, and there's been no lack of his presence in my life and what he's done for me personally. But when you grow up in Kentucky, there is nothing else besides basketball. That is it. And that's where, talking earlier about the fashion thing with you, Zach, for the first time I got it out of a world to where all I knew for 18 years through high school was basketball. That was it. So I kind of like found that other piece of like, enjoyment or whatever. There was more to the world than basketball. So there's that piece, number one. And then number two, it's for as long as I can remember, and I was very young, my mom and him are brother and sister. It's just them, the two siblings. And they grew up in a town 30 minutes away from where I grew up. He grew up in Madisonville, Kentucky, played at Madisonville, North Hopkins. And my grandparents, when I was in 6th grade, moved to Henderson, Kentucky, where I live, where I grew up. They moved about 150 yards from me in 6th grade. But for as long as I can remember, all the way back to, I don't remember memories of being at games at Kentucky, but I've got pictures, and my family obviously would tell me about different experiences because that was young for me. I was born in 92. That was right in the middle of his college career, graduated in 94, so I was very young. But a ton of stories, and to be honest with you, the small white guy that played at Kentucky, it doesn't get any bigger than that in that state. So there was a lot of, I don't want to call it pressure because it wasn't like anybody, but that is what people wanted to talk about a lot from just my playing career, and was nowhere near the player he was. And ultimately I ended up, going to IMG, and I could shoot the ball. I knew how to play, ended up getting offers that I probably never deserved. I got them simply because I was on a good team. And I was a late bloomer. I really figured out what working hard meant after my junior year in high school. And so luckily, and ended up going to play for him at Oklahoma State. But nonetheless, I don't want to call it hard because it wasn't like your dad's Michael Jordan or something like that. It wasn't that, because everybody knew I wasn't him. And but it's something that is absolutely I wouldn't trade it for the world, obviously. I have so many things to be thankful for that he's done for me directly, and hopefully I'm, starting to return the favor a little bit. But I think while he was very prominent, I was always following him. When I was young, we were detached because, when he was at Eastern Kentucky, we were there a lot. But when he went to UMass, we would go up there a few times a year. But I had my life going on in Kentucky, and I'm young at that point. We're an extremely tight-knit family. But we weren't in constant communication. I'd seen when I saw him or whatever. It wasn't until I was graduating high school, trying to decide what I wanted to do. And I had some interest low Division I, but I decided to go to prep school. I needed that, and I went to a very good one, ended up playing on a very, very good IMG Academy team and getting low to mid-major offers, some warranted, some, but I knew I wanted to be in basketball. And so, But going back, graduating my senior year in high school, I go and I work out at Oklahoma State with the team, with their trainer and different things. And I lived with him for that summer before I went to IMG. And I changed a lot there. And that's when our relationship really, really started to morph into, what we've built today from a standpoint of, he would come to IMG because I played there with Kamari Murphy, who had signed with Oklahoma State. And so all these things. So then I ultimately, when it was time to make that decision, knew that I wanted to be at a high level. I knew they were supposed to be pretty good. Went in with the mindset of by no means was I good enough to play at Oklahoma State. And I knew that. The game was too fast for me. Could I shoot? Did I know the game? But I was hoping to find my way and then maybe get some minutes later in my career and different things. But again, knowing what the long-term goal was for me was more important than going to Florida Gulf Coast or Florida International and starting for 4 years and playing. I had a bigger goal past college. And so all these kind of things kind of play into the relationship that we have today. Fast forward, I played 4 years for him at Oklahoma State, and he comes and takes a job here. And at that time, I've gone back. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was very close. My two best friends who I came in with were Phil Forte and Marcus Smart. And every summer I'd spend time with Marcus and really was around the NBA, around a lot of people. And I thought I wanted to be an agent. So fast track, I end up coming here. I was going to GA. The guy he had hired as my role, Tommy Wade, actually leaves that summer to take an assistant job at Jacksonville State. And that's when I stepped into the role. But I had to earn it a little bit. Like, I'll remember he made me wait like a month or two after I voiced that I would like to do that, just to see. I ran our camps and to see if I could do it. And I still, for a year or two, probably honestly didn't know what I wanted to do. Long story short, here I am today. that's a whole nother story. But with our relationship, without getting off track too much here, I have a tendency to do that. But it's morphed into, is he my boss? Do I have the ultimate amount of respect for him? Absolutely. But there's also a level of internally within our program, because we do share the same blood, that again, it's a relationship that I don't take for granted by any means. Of, again, we were raised by the same people. My grandparents, I'm just as close to my grandparents as I am my parents. And so we think a lot of the same ways. We have a lot of the same tendencies. I'll find myself doing things. And again, that's all I've known for 8 years. Day in and day out, I talk to him multiple times a day about life, about all these things. He's been nothing short of a mentor and really a secondary father figure. I'm as close to him as I am my dad. My dad's from Norway, came over and played tennis. And so going back to just our relationship, it's very unique. It's one that obviously I'm proud of. And what a lot of people don't know is when I got promoted to an assistant coach, he went through the process with me the same way he went through. There was a lot of people wanting this job, obviously, and there was a lot of different things, and timing is everything in this business. And I don't take for granted, the opportunity I've been given, and I try to work and warrant that. But when that time happened, there was a long period of time where it went by. He didn't know what he was going to do, and we would talk about it, but it was kind of kept close to the chest for him, and he kind of navigated that. He actually sent me out a little recruiting during that summer. And I think ultimately he was at a point in his career and saw something in me that I had an eagerness to be successful. But again, make no mistake about it, I owe everything to the guys ahead of me, Van, Corey, Will, Coach, but then the players that win that A-10 tournament. If we don't win that, Van maybe doesn't leave for St. John's. I may still be in ops, and who knows if I'm here, who knows where, crazy. Everything's timing. And so I'm extremely fortunate for that. But I went through the process. We sat down, and it was obviously a little more casual than the interview process, but those people he voiced to me, I may hire this guy, I may hire that guy. And I'll never forget one day he told me, he said, I haven't ruled you out. And I thought at that time I had a chance. At that time, I still, and I still to this day struggle. And I've spoken about this out loud about, warranting at such a young age my position. And I still, I'm going from a relationship with our guys. It's kind of, an older brother to now a little bit of a mentor. And so there's a lot of things going through my head. Am I ready for this? Can I really do it? And it happened so fast. Now looking back, you just hit the ground running, you work as hard as you can. But there's a lot of reasons why. Number one, and everybody can agree with this. You don't ever want to let your family down. Number one. So my biggest, I think, drive for success right now is the simple fact that he gave me an opportunity, and there's nothing that's going to come in between me and trying to be as successful as I can and warranting him giving me that opportunity. But then on top of that, it's funny you asked that question, because there is a side of me, and we've spoke out about this, that he's going to be done coaching at some point. I'm going to move on. There's going to be things happen. I love it here. It's great. And I think as you build, my time will come, whether that's as a head coach, whether it's in this business, whatever it is. I have been in his shadow a lot, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. Who better to learn from? I truly, and I will take majority of what I've learned from him and will continue to learn. And it shaped who I am, for the better part of my life here in the last 8 years. I've been around him more than anybody in my entire life, parents, fiance, all these things. And so there's really nobody that I've been closer to for the last 8 years, and who better to learn from. And I can get into that in a second, just about him and the way, that we can talk about how he attacks different things in life, and just, I've seen the way he works, his work ethic and things like that. And I've adapted a lot of that. But yeah, going back, my grandpa is the cornerstone of the whole thing. My grandpa ran AAU tournaments and ran teams for Nike out of Kentucky for a long time. And like I said, growing up, all I can remember is being by his side and just taking in, seeing how he maneuvered relationships, communicating. Those things are big pieces that I've taken from my grandpa, which trickled down. And ultimately my relationship with Coach, and I've just recently over the last year learned to call him Coach, because it was always my uncle. That's just always what I called him. And it's funny, actually, that Chris May would be happy to hear that he was the one who brought that up with me in a good way. It was like, you got to start calling him coach. And I'm like, that's weird for me. And so now I call him coach, and it feels more normal, but it was a struggle for a while. But nonetheless, what my grandpa taught to my uncle growing up, my uncle then is kind of, it's morphed into that, but my grandpa is kind of the one who taught me everything growing up, as far as just seeing how he maneuvered and dealt with basketball and communication and all that. But you hear a lot of stories. As far as stories, I'm trying to think and rack my brain, and if one comes to me over this conversation, I'll bring it back up. But growing up, you heard a lot of stories that I would never hear directly from him. We don't talk a lot about, his past, and he's not big on that, or like, things he did, this, and this. I mean, he'll tell stories, of his playing days a lot and different things. But I think growing up in Kentucky, so many people, just the work ethic that he had, and just really coming to realize how good of a player he was. And he's voiced that he loved his time at Mizzou, and they went through some struggles and went through some issues up there and ultimately transferred, but, trying to decide where he went, and it all worked out at Kentucky and playing for Pitino. But as I've started coaching for him, I've seen how many things he's developed from Coach Pitino, a lot of the things he does, the way he, recruits, the way he, runs his practices. I've never been around a harder worker in my life, and I think that's, I've tried to adapt that, and it raises the level when your head coach is doing it. It raises the level of what everybody else, has to do to keep up. And I've learned a lot in a year, but more than anything, if your head coach is not locked in and dialed in recruiting, you have no shot. You got no shot, because at the end of the day, I can get on every plane and go anywhere in the country. I can go all the way across the world, but kids want to hear from the head coach. They want to hear the head coach. They want to hear what he's got to say. And so when your head coach is detached from that, it's very, very difficult. And that's one thing I've learned, and he is bought in. Is he out humping it as much as maybe he was at Oklahoma State? He's gotten a little older. We built something here where, again, there wasn't, the density in players here in St. Louis is ridiculous. And so we've kind of hunkered down this area, but he is extremely involved in that and always on top of it. We meet about recruiting about 5 times a week. We talk through it. It changes daily, hourly, different things happen, but his work ethic is one thing I've learned. But yeah, I got off there, but there's no shortage of, he's wholeheartedly a major reason why I am, where I'm at today, obviously. But he's got a unique ability to navigate people. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned from him is growing up in Kentucky. But also, especially, in these times, it's talked about a lot. We've talked about it on Zooms of, growing up in the Black community, not in the Black community, but with, different people on different teams and different things like that, and learning to navigate that world as much as, his world that he grew up in and mix the two. And he's just got he can be in a room with, the most prestigious people in St. Louis, or he can be in a room with the people, from across the river or wherever you want to call it, and navigate it the exact same. And his heart is as pure as gold, and he's sincere in everything he does, and he works. Everything he's ever gotten in his life. I mean, he's 5'8". He'd kill me for saying that, but he ain't an inch over 5'9", and to do what he's done in his career from a playing standpoint, and then from a coaching standpoint, is nothing short of amazing, obviously. And so I'm proud of him. I hope I'm making him, proud of myself. I just take it a day at a time. And again, we've got a good relationship.
You mentioned learning a lot from Travis, but you've become kind of known as kind of a young hotshot recruiter among fans. I think people get excited to see, you tweet out headed to this place, the airplane emoji and where you're going, and they know something good's cooking when they see that.
Yeah.
What is your general philosophy on how you approach recruiting, and do you take most of that from Travis, or have you picked it up from other places, and if so, where?
Generally, again, going back to how he navigates that is absolutely where I've learned that from. I was blessed, obviously, to be around my grandfather at a young age a lot, and he knows more people. Him and Corey Tate are the two people that probably know more people than anybody else that I know in the world. They just everybody. He's a talker. He's everything. So it was ingrained in me at a young age to just be a talker and just navigate relationships and communicate and stay on top of that. And you can't have any shortness of that in this business. And so I think that's where the natural side of, that comes from. But then you have to enjoy it because, and I talk about this with other coaches a lot of people want to get into coaching this and that. And if you don't enjoy that piece of it and you're in college basketball, and that's not to say that you're always going to love it. I mean, I've spent long nights driving from, flying from Miami to Charleston, South Carolina, driving to South Carolina, middle of nowhere to a game, driving from there to Atlanta, getting in at 4 a.m. There's a lot of that. And so to sit there and say that that's just pure fun, I'd be lying to you. But again, the eagerness and for me, it's all the little wins along the way. And I'm big on celebrating those things, whether it's winning a game, whether it's getting a recruit, whether you have a successful practice, all these things. We're in such a fleeting business that if you don't celebrate those things, you're going to look up one day and you just have to appreciate them. And so all these things play into kind of my approach, along with what I just alluded to with my relationship with him about I'm a guy that when I got the job, I came in and Will Bailey and Corey Tate are nothing short of amazing in the recruiting world and the way that they navigate. And they're two very different people in how they go about it. And I've learned from both of them. Will is bury your nose, work day in and day out, on the phone all the time, call in. So I've learned from that, which has been very valuable. Van Macon I got 5 names on a list, I better get one of them. Whereas Will Bailey will walk into our meetings and have a list of, and I'm a mixture of both. I don't do it quite like Will Bailey and have that many kids, just because I think you can spread yourself thin a little bit, but that's how he approaches it. Corey Tate has put the nail in the coffin in St. Louis. He knows more people. And so again, how Corey navigates relationships within a city, I've never heard him say a bad word about anybody or somebody say a bad word about him. Best dude you'll ever meet. Everybody loves him. But these people, as well as Coach, obviously, but these people have helped me navigate a world where, again, I'm a young guy trying to make it, but I didn't come into it with this notion that, okay, I'm going to be, like what you said, a young hotshot recruiter. I know that comes with it. And to me, when I approach it, I'm just like, honestly, in my head, I'm not thinking about what I'm doing. I'm just like, this is part of the job. This is what it is. And if that notion gets, perceived, then great. Obviously, I'll take it. But in no way, shape, or form when I'm, going somewhere and tweeting it thinking, oh, this is going to get me this reputation, this, and this. No, I'm trying to go as many places, meet as many people, because if there's anything that I've learned in my short 28 years on this earth is there's no burned bridges. There's no bad relationships. And I tell everybody that. I've had things come out in the last year of relationships of people that I knew that I played AAU with in high school, in middle school, 7th, 8th grade, that now have attachments to players who are some of the top players in the Midwest. And so my point is, you never know when these things, and it's no different than trying to get into the business. Everybody wants to just call, when somebody's got openings or this and that. No, these things start at the ground level and they're built over time. So, I may be friends with an AAU coach in Dallas, Texas, and he may not have a player for 5 years. But the one time he does, if I've been keeping in touch and keeping a real, and I'm a person, I just like real relationships. I don't like all the fluff. And so if I'm keeping in touch and legitimately concerned, you don't think that that's going to go a lot further than, 5 years go by, all of a sudden I heard you got a player. Hey, and that's not to say you can communicate with everybody. I don't have enough time in the day. But every time that I get these opportunities, again, when I fly to Miami, meet one high school coach, from that point on for the rest of my career, I now know them. I have a connection to them. And so that's how I've approached it, of a standpoint of like, and I've seen Corey and Will navigate it, of I didn't come into this with, I'm going to be a recruiter. I was trying to be a chameleon, and still to this day, I'm the young gopher that again, I'm trying to make it. These guys are at a different stage in their career. They're different ages. We all want different things in our lives and careers. But for me, I never approached it kind of like what you're saying. I've never really stopped and thought about it. And so obviously I appreciate you saying those things. And yeah, it feels good to for your hard work to pay off and for this to happen. But for me, if there's ever a chance for me to get on, and it goes back to the relationship that I have with Coach and the trust factor of there may be somebody text him about a kid, and because I am his blood and we've been around each other for so long and think so along the same lines, he trusts me to get on the plane and go here or go there. No different than when I went to Europe. I was very, very hesitant on that whole trip and different things, and I would have never came back and said a kid could play if I didn't see it multiple times and then do my due diligence. And again, I'm not going to be on my first year throwing out guys that are borderline can play or anything like that. And so with Andre Lawrenson, when I saw that whole thing come out and happen and kind of maturate, it was like, oh crap, like I was hesitant, but I was also like, no, we need to get on this before anybody else. And so that's another story. But nonetheless, everything, and I know everybody says it, everything is about relationships. There's so many relationships that will never, and it's not about relationships that can do things for you. It's about the ones that I can't tell you how many kids I went and watched last year that will never make another phone call, nothing, this and that, but you never know when it's going to come back around. And so for me, the love of the game, because I tell everybody, it's more than a job. This is way more than a job. And Coach says this, it's a lifestyle. And before I got the job, that's what he told me. I was, due to get engaged. All these things were happening in my life, and it was more or less, are you ready for what this entails? Are you ready? And I knew that more so than being an ops, my position was going to directly affect how this program was going to do and how he was going to do. So it was bigger than, here, stick you in this ops role. Let's see how you do. Not that I didn't matter, not that those positions don't matter, but they don't have near effect that you do in this level. And so it was big for me, and that will always be big for me. Now, will I be 50 years old? We're still recruiting like I am now? No, but to me, that's just part of it. If I'm going to make some of myself in this business or anything and help this program win, and it's just day in and day out. Again, I can tell you how many kids I got on a list and different things and different places I'm set to go when we open this thing back up. But you waste a lot of time. But there's no better feeling than getting somebody. And it's more than just whether a kid can play or not. It's characteristics. It's how have they been coached. It's where they fit in the system. And, there's been kids I've missed on. That's a terrible feeling. And then, when you hit on one, it's a good feeling, but it's just the beginning. Like Andre Lawrence, got to come in here and do the work. Mark Strickland, got to come in here and do the work. And they're coming in at a good time. But for me, I tell everybody, again, alluding back to those guys, I've come into the best situation in the country from a standpoint of, if we had just had 2 losing seasons and Coach was on the hot seat or something, I can't even imagine having this position. It's easy for me. I just navigate. I hop on planes. I go watch players. I build relationships. And, when we find the right one, we go after it, and we go after it hard. But, again, we're in a good place, and that's all credit to those guys and what they've done. And so that's how I approach it.
So one of the things you brought up earlier as we're talking about you and, your methods in recruiting and everything, you talked about your trip overseas, and I wondered what that experience is like for you from a recruiting standpoint. Like, how does that differ from what you would see in the United States, where you've got the club teams that travel around the country, like the St. Louis Eagles and the EYBL leagues, and then you've got the high school kids that are playing, school ball. How is that different overseas?
Completely. 1,000% wholeheartedly, whole different world. And that was a big, for me, hesitation. And I'm not going to get off on a rant here, because I did this with Stu Durando about a month ago. And this we could just have a whole podcast on that trip and what that world looks like. But I'll dumb it down into a very slimmed out version. Ray Giacoletti comes on staff. And for me, obviously being around Coach for so long, I knew one way, that I knew his way, and obviously it's great. But Ray's been around the block too. And I had a different relationship with Ray in the standpoint of, Corey Tate's been a head coach, Will's been around the block, but Ray's been a head coach, Division I, different places, and he'd been at Gonzaga, a very, very comparable situation. And so I was intrigued when he came on. I try to learn everything from him, from everybody. But when he came on, I was so excited because I was going to get to see how it was done somewhere else. So Gonzaga being like the cornerstone, like the alpha, what we hope to be in 10, 20 years. I guess it's been at least 20 years now. They've been doing what they've been doing. But nonetheless, I sat down with him about a month into him being here, was like, tell me, I want to know everything. Day in and day out, I come into the office. How'd you guys do this? Tell me how you got this kid. How did you all become, small Jesuit university, all these different things. And so he puts me in contact with a scouting service over there, a guy that is involved in the scouting service played for him at Utah. Long story short, that connection's made. Fast forward, I put it off for a few months. We were in a good place. I was skeptical about going over there. I'd just become an assistant, where the season was on the horizon, scouting reports, I had a lot going on. And I'm just like, and he's pushing me a little bit, this and that. Nonetheless, we played Belmont. I'll never forget it. The day before Belmont, he had a conversation with this guy or whatever. They had just touched base. And he's like, you need to go over there. He's like, this would be a good time. We had one game in Phoenix over 2 weeks. I wasn't big on missing a game. My first year, here I am going to miss a season or a regular season game. And I'll never forget it. We called, it's a couple days before Belmont, we called. The guy sends me back an itinerary. These are the best players over there. We went over there with the intent of trying to find a big. And fast forward, I booked this trip. Again, going back to Chris May and the resources and what I told you earlier of being willing, not a cheap trip, 2 days in advance of all the places I went and the things I did. But he was more than on board when Coach picked it. So I go into Coach. Coach was kind of iffy about me missing a game, this and that, whatever. And Ray backed me up and was like, it's worth it, Coach. Trust me. He needs to get over there. He needs to get it, not only, for the program and different things I was excited about for me, but I was very, very hesitant because I don't know that world. I know overseas basketball through this and that, but as far as going over there in the middle of the season by myself, navigating this, then on top of that, to what you're talking about, a lot of the places I went don't want those kids playing college. Now, that's not the case everywhere, and that's where this story can get a whole lot longer. But nonetheless, I booked the flight. We played Belmont. The next day I leave. I'm in Europe for a 9-day hiatus, going all over the place. If I would not have had this scouting service and had the relationship with them to help me through this, give me my itinerary, who am I watching, they'd sit at games with me. But I went over there and kind of what your question's asking, not with one piece of slew gear. I did not – none of that. Like, you go in there incognito, try to fly under the radar. You sit up high, these games. So the first game I go to is in Barcelona. I land. That night there's a game between Barcelona and somebody. It's at the tip of my tongue. I don't know, but the arena is the one where the Dream Team won the Olympics. It's in Barcelona. So the guy from the scouting service picks me up. We go watch it. See a slew of kids there. No pun intended. A ton of them. Go back, sleep, wake up the next day. I'm in Barcelona to Madrid. I'm going to watch Real Madrid, build connections. Nonetheless, different guy from the scouting service puts me in contact with people in Madrid. I go watch 2 different games, I think, in Madrid. So I'm watching kids there. Those 2 games are in Spain. Kids grow up playing, and this part will be interesting, so I'll allude to this a little bit. I went and watched Real Madrid and play against some little teams on the outskirts of Madrid, and then I went the next day to their practice facility, which is like a Fort Knox, trying to get in there. It's the same. It's the soccer thing. It's top notch. But anyway, so there, and then in Barcelona, I watched Barcelona's U19 team, and both of these are very, very prominent. Like, probably the closest thing. Those programs are the closest thing to probably the NBA. That they both have higher. Obviously, Luka Doncic, Barcelona. Anyways, so he puts me backtrack. I go and have breakfast with who I have mutual friends, and Ray put me in touch, Kevin Pangos, who played at Gonzaga. We had breakfast that next morning, so then I built that connection. Rewind to what I'm talking about, Gonzaga, if you'll go read, and you may know who this is, Tommy Lloyd, the assistant there, who will be the head coach there when Few's done, has made the biggest footprint in overseas basketball probably in the country. Then backtrack to the guy that was here, Chris Harriman, who did a lot. So I'm learning all these things. This is just an immense amount of knowledge coming at me so fast. Anyways, so funny. I'm in Barcelona for 24 hours. The next morning before I leave, I go have breakfast with Kevin Pangos, And Tommy Lloyd had already caught wind that I was over there from somebody he knew. He's plugged in with everybody over there. Anyways, funny. That's just a funny piece of it. But these two places are places that they do not want their kids. No different. It'd be the equivalent of FC Barcelona coming to our game or practice or whatever with an FC Barcelona, and then them talking to one of our kids after the game or whatever, or you know, trying to basically poach and say, hey, come play overseas after. We don't want that. We're not, you know, not saying we don't want them to play pro or whatever, but that's probably a bad comparison because it's pro, they're making money. But nonetheless,
just not right now.
You get the gist of it.
Yeah,
and so,
after they're done with college, then you can go play Barcelona.
They do not want that. And so I'm navigating through that, and thank goodness I've got people to bounce ideas off of. Fast forward to Madrid. From there, I go to what was the grunt of the trip, and in Gran Canary Islands, there was a tournament, and that's where more kids. So the funny thing is, you got to understand, these kids in Spain that are playing on these teams, they take the best kids at 12, 13, 14, and they bring them to Barcelona, Real Madrid, all these different
academies
teams that have junior teams.
Yeah, the academies.
And they prime them. They prime them like Luka Doncic, and then all of a sudden they put them on their main team. So you're navigating that. So what I realized quickly, whereas here you're competing against a lot of different schools for a kid, and you're dealing with AAU coaches and everything. There, you're not competing with a lot of colleges. There's not a ton of colleges involved. You're dealing with agents, and you're dealing with the teams that maybe they play for, whether they have or haven't made money, different things. So fast forward, in Sweden, it's completely different. They don't have prominent pro basketball. They're not trying to play pro. They don't have agents. They don't have a lot of that. They want to play college basketball. So that was a relief, obviously. So I go to Gran Canary Islands, navigate through that. Again, there's so many ins and outs. But what it allowed me to do, the point, and again, I told you I get off on a rant on this deal. For me to go over there during that time, and for Chris to allow me to, and Coach to allow me to, it allowed me to build relationships that are – I sat for 3 days in Gran Canary Islands with European NBA scouts that cover Europe for the Nets, the 76ers, and the Wizards, and then a guy from the scouting service. And I got to break bread with them, and I got to sit down. And so now there's a direct correlation where we have a relationship. We talk multiple times a month. We keep each other up to date. So now, because I went over there in a time where no other college coaches, and I've told people this, I'd be willing to bet there's not 5 assistants in the country that went to Europe in the middle of the season. Just doesn't happen. It's not the norm. And it just allowed the timing, everything. So for me to be over there and get to sit at a table with them and watch these games and ask every question. And again, I'm a talker, I'm a question person, and I'm writing things down, and they know everything about these players. But then we go out to eat dinner, we go, do these things. I've now built a Rolodex of relationships over there that will now benefit this program and myself for years to come. Now I have a direct relationship. So that was the biggest piece coming out of this. Andre Lawrenson just happens to be, the diamond in the rough that we found. I never expected to come back and have a kid that I was so excited that we would go after. And so nonetheless, going over at that time, because and overseas basketball is starting to be recruited hot every year, it gets a little more highly recruited. But what everybody does is they'll go over for the FIBA games, or they'll go over in July or whatever. And when you're there with 50 other college coaches, you can't build the relationships that I got to build with some prominent people in European basketball by just being me. And so, yeah, when I'm over in FIBA games, I might get to have one conversation, but I don't get to build. And so that, and then I actually went to Paris to see another game. When I was there was protests, transportation protests. Putin was in town. It was crazy. I ended up not getting to see the games that I was supposed to. But that trip was huge. A huge step. And then obviously Andre Lawrenson worked out and panned out, and we had to do some competing for him a little bit because it blew up just like anything else does. But it still amazes me to this day. If you're a good player out there, they'll find you. People will find you. And that's that story. Like I said, I could go on.
I love digging into how things happen behind the scenes, because and that's been my goal with the podcast episodes and the watch alongs that I've been trying to do. And One thing I've always been interested in is something like, obviously you have transfers out of the program, but you also have transfers into the program. And I've always wondered how those transfers work because they seem to come together so quickly. And, a guy like Francis Okoro and a guy like Martin Lenson, how do those transfers come about? Do they reach out to you? Is that another relationship thing?
Yeah.
How does that go?
Everyone's different. Every single one is a different situation. But again, I go back to no burn bridges in this business. No different than there's kids here in St. Louis, and that's why I think this program and this job is such a hidden gem and can be along the same lines of a Butler, Gonzaga, Villanova down the line. And obviously, there's a lot of work to be done to get there. But you have, as I alluded to earlier, an extreme amount of talent. As far as talent per capita, for me personally, I would put it up there with almost anywhere in the country. Dallas has a ton of players. Chicago produces some for the state of Florida. But as far as high level, you've got, and I was having this conversation with somebody in town the other day, you've got at least 10 guys coming out playing Division I basketball every single year. That's not to say we're going to get all of them. And where I pat Coach Tate and Coach Ford on the back with the St. Louis thing is I've learned quickly you got to take the right ones. And that's not to say, a lot of people want to talk about Majerus not recruiting here for whatever reason, this and that. I don't know too much about that. All I know is there's no better place than home to me personally. And we figured it out. That's not to say there's not going to be situations that don't work out and there's kids that, but you deal with a whole different set of problems when you've got a St. Louis kid. You do, and it's just inevitable. The family's around. They got a lot of people at games. There's different things, not bad problems. They're just problems that come with recruiting here. So, again, choosing the right ones that fit in the pieces and laying that out when you're recruiting them. But I go back to when we got here, Jordan Goodwin was so far-fetched. I mean, at that time, you're talking Mizzou, Illinois, North Carolina, Northwestern. Like, that was not even – and I'll never forget Chris May coming in the office every day that summer talking about Jordan Goodwin. And Coach, I give Coach and Coach Tate a lot of credit because very similar to what Coach did at Oklahoma State with LeBron Nash, it started a pipeline. And in the age of social media and in the age of when kids are coming up, getting Jordan Goodwin and then later Hassan French from New York was such a pivotal point for this program. And anytime you take over a job, you got 1 or 2 years, you got those first 2 recruiting classes to make some noise. But Jordan Goodwin saying, hey, I'm staying home and going to SLU, then it really kickstarts it. And Mizzou and Illinois were a little bit down in the first year we were here, so we got a little bit of a head start, for lack of a better term, in recruiting. But starting with that, and then you fast forward into Fred Thatch, who was a pretty highly recruited with BBE, and we've got a great relationship with them, obviously, and different things. But then fast forward, and while implementing team, again, you can go out and get other ones. There's enough talent here, and you go after the Caleb Loves and Cameron Fletchers and, those guys. And to the question you asked, when they transfer, things aren't always going to work out. No different than guys don't work out here. And it's going to be, you think it's bad now, just wait till this thing goes through. And so, again, that's okay that they don't want to come here out of high school. We're going to recruit them no differently than anybody else. And you get a feel early on that, like with Caleb Love, we just kind of knew early on it just probably wasn't going to happen. Now, Cam Fletcher, we had a different feeling, but that's okay. But there's enough here that, again, like I'm saying, if they go off, this is still home. And so that's where I think this has been, so pivotal. Again, going back, you got Fred Thatch. Then all of a sudden you pull off Cartier Gordon, and now you're really rolling. And then you figure out Yuri and TJ. And now these, in an era of ball is life and mixtapes and this and that, and these kids are they move in the city and social media. The kids that are freshmen and playing on BBE and these things have now seen Yuri Collins and TJ Hargrove, Jordan Goodwin, Cartier Gordon stay home when they're being recruited. And all of a sudden, now you look up and we've got a wealth of St. Louis kids, and so all these things, they compact over years. And that's why I go back to with Jordan Goodwin, but you're not getting too far off subject with the transfer thing. They all happen differently. You'll hear through the grapevine, there'll be coaches calling each other, hey, this guy's leaving, AAU coaches, because you can't have contact with a kid at a different school. But again, we've all got contact with AAU coaches. So AAU coaches may call and say, hey, this guy's not happy, this guy. So and you can look at stat sheets, and again, you think it's prominent now. Just wait till you can go anywhere any year, and it's going to kill high school. Like, it's going to be crazy. More people recruit transfers than they will anywhere else. But this is a big transfer market because of the level it's at. You can get guys like Javon Best that are realistic with themselves and say, God, I just need to go down a level and be the man or whatever, come from Michigan State where he was a piece and come here and try to, be a focal point. We had other people come in, Luis Santos, Adonis Enriquez, Ty Graves, these guys who we never got to see play. But nonetheless, this is a great market. And now let's rope back in all the things that I was telling you. We operate exactly like a Power 5, so there's no lag. We got guys that have come from Power 5s that haven't haven't received half the treatment they've gotten here from how we operate. And I've been, obviously at Oklahoma State and seen how things are done there. There's no lapse. And so that, along with the playing field, it's a huge transfer market. And that's not to say you can't have all transfers, and we're very sensitive to that right now from a standpoint of we got to take the right ones, because we've got such a good core group that you take the wrong one and implement it into a locker room, they got different agendas. Every kid, if a kid is leaving somewhere, they've got a different idea of what they want from where they're coming. And so for whatever reason, whether they want to be the best player, whether they all want to play in the NBA, we all know that, but whether they want to be, have more prominent role, they just don't see their future. Maybe they're homesick. Maybe there's a lot of different reasons why kids transfer. But nonetheless, this is home for a lot of kids. So, and then when you're good, but again, you got to be careful, because if a kid transfers from, I don't know, throw out a random school, Michigan State or Indiana, if they don't buy into it, there's these kids that transfer down and they think they're doing you a favor. And they think, oh, I'm coming in here and I'm just going to, the gap isn't that big, my man. The gap is not between those schools and these. It's not like you're just coming in here and you're averaging 20, like automatic. No. And now, especially where we're at, it's even more like that. So like a Francis Okoro, who is just a great kid through and through, fits perfectly. We'll implement him right into the locker room, these things and that. But then there's kids out there, and without naming names, that you're weary of. Can they play? For sure, but they will run your culture in a heartbeat. And so you got to be careful.
So you mentioned, your trips to, Florida, New York, you've been all over, you've been over to Europe. Where's the next place that you want to head as soon as you're allowed to travel?
Well, number one,
I can't hear you, Colin.
Oh, sorry. We're right back. As soon as you said that, it jumped back in, so we're fine. That's lovely how that works out for me.
So I want to switch gears now to the bench. And we talked, we've gone into the recruiting and everything, but the bench is one thing I learned this year is that the person sitting to Travis's left, it had the game scout.
Coach Giacoletti was great this year filling in for Coach Tate. Coach Tate had an issue, but was vocal within the staff and stuff and could only do so much, was out and had a rough year with an injury that he suffered early on. And so, again, Coach Giacoletti filled in, with no lack of knowledge and experience. Was 28 years old. That was my first year of coaching. Do I study? Do I do everything to try to that I can to try to help? For sure. But at the end of the day, I can't, as these guys can say, oh, we did this at, LaSalle, like Will would, or oh, we did this at Missouri, or oh, you're trying to figure out what would work offensively. Defensively, we changed defenses a ton. That it's high level emotion. I mean, there's multiple times this year when, again, something goes wrong, or maybe you did something or this and that, and you'll think, oh, I forgot to show them this, or I forgot to show them that. And while they remember about 1/10 of the knowledge you actually give them, we give them an immense amount of knowledge on the teams we're playing, you still think, oh, it all matters. I'm big on, I try to dumb it down and not give them too much. They're kids. They can only, but I need to know everything. I need to know every in and out. That's why I watch every bit of the last at least 5 games. And I need to have every note and everything and studied. Like I'm about to take the ACT because these things are precious. I mean, they are. There's no lack of that. And I could show you scouting reports and different things and how thick they are in the notes and the binders and the folders of things I've got just from this year. But when you're in that seat, there's pride in that. There is. And so, but it's high intensity. I've gotten my rear end chewed a couple times by him. I'll never forget. I was at St. Joe's and I didn't show a side out of bounds play. And God, they ran it. They didn't score, but it was kind of them trying to do something. And he gave me a few words there. And I was like, never again will I not show a side out of bounds play if I see one. So you learn.
I love when he like lunges. I love when he lunges and pulls back. That's one of my
That's where we're so similar in so many ways. Where I'm different is I'm very, very – I've got a fire in my belly. I'm not as outwardly emotional as he's kicking the scoreboard on the road. People get so mad at him. That's him. He's fire. I tell everybody, he coaches the same way he plays. If you go back and watch how he plays, he was a mean little son of a gun. I mean, and so he coaches like that, and it's just how he is. Where I'm more, and Coach Tate is very like even kill, and so Coach Tate's been good for him, and even me because I'm like him. I'm fired up, but I'm not like outwardly. And again, he's the head coach, but he's high strung, and like Coach Tate would be like, Coach, it's all right, chill. And then there'll be sometimes Coach, no, it's not all right. So we all compliment each other, but yeah, there's no lack of that. He has mellowed. I will say that. I tell everybody from the time I got there as a freshman and even talking to the guys who played for him prior and watching him growing up, he has mellowed a ton. And I credit that to where he's at in his career, his happiness being here and where we're at as a program, but also, he's getting older and probably has a different approach on things. But as well as, you can't be like that anymore. Like I said earlier, there's very few of the coaches doing what coaches were doing back when he played for
the Bobby Knights.
Yeah, it's just different. And so again, he's adapted. I give him credit. He's gone from a young, fiery, like you said, Bobby Knight, Bobby Hurley type coach to mellowing out. Now that's not to say he doesn't have his spasms over there. Y'all see it.
I want to ask a question since we talked about frustrations and kind of emotional things that happened during the season. I want to talk about Duquesne. For some reason, man, Duquesne seemed to have our number this past year. What do you think that was attributed to?
I've thought a lot about that. We've actually gone back and started, and we're a few games in of talking about each game. We all watch, and then we get on a Zoom and talk about it. And we started with Duquesne a couple weeks ago. And there's so many different things. And I think from the outside looking in, and you guys, are obviously passionate fans and probably understand more than the normal fan about it. But nobody really truly, until you're in it, understands what goes into a game. I don't think they understand the process and how, if you were in meetings and heard some of the things that we talk about, people would it would die laughing from the standpoint of like, you think that matters? I do it all the time. Like Coach is big on charter flights, or when we get, things from like crazy things, like things that are the most minute things, but I didn't realize it until I got my first learning experience was the Belmont Scout. It was my first kind of big scout. And
Slewnet.
All right, we're back. Another small hiccup there. Sorry.
Slewnet?
Yeah. But nonetheless, going back, you never know what that one thing is. Again, is it what you told them the night before at scouting report? Is it telling them how you guard, the point guard and forcing him down, to the flood, not letting him in the paint? Is it, the mentality we decide literally during starting lineups? Coach and I had talked about going and doubling their big man just the first time, just to get him off balance. We sit down. We do the starting lineups. We sit down, and I said, "Did you tell him?" No. It was no. Backtrack. It's during starting lineups. They turn the lights off. They're in the thing, and he's writing on the board. And I walk over to him and I said, "You want to do it?" And he's like, "Well, you think we should?" And I'm like, "Sure, dude. Let's do it." So, anyways, he tells them right then in the huddle, doubling the first time. Sure enough, he turns it over. We win the game by 5. You never know, and he has a terrible game and was averaging whatever he was averaging, 15 points a game. Nonetheless, that was my first moment. So going back to your question of Duquesne, all these things throughout the course of a season matter. And that's what is so scary and is so – it's the one tough part about this league and this job is with this league, you can't have many of those. You can't have many slip – and I don't even call that a slip-up because Duquesne's good. Now, you want to call UMass what it was, okay. We squeak out of St. Joe's and LaSalle, Duquesne at home. But I get what you're saying. But nonetheless, you go in there, they're playing at Robert Morris. They never have a crowd. We're used to this. No, I can't answer that to you. They're a little bit of our kryptonite, whereas we're some other teams' kryptonite. You saw how we played Dayton, Richmond, whereas, Richmond loses 4 games or whatever it is, but we beat them by whatever we beat them, but then we can't beat Duquesne. You can do this. And that's the scary part about this whole thing is when the standard is what it is to make the tournament in this league, and the way that we're going about scheduling and attacking and going for it and playing these tough games and going to try to play, a lot of tough opponents, you can't afford a lot of those. And the sad reality is you're dealing with 18, 19, 20-year-old kids that, again, they may have just slept on the wrong side of the bed last night. We depended so much on Jordan Goodwin and with the energy he brought day in and day out that if one day he had an off day, especially in those early points. And then I go back to 2, and I made this point on our staff Zoom the other day, and somebody else did in the next Zoom. When we were talking about Duquesne, I said, guys, let's rewind. Gibson Jefferson goes down in Maryville, and they give us a scare. And we weren't really the same for about 5 or 6 games after that. If you'll think back, you got Maryville, then you go and you beat you beat
Carbondale?
Bethune-Cookman, maybe. I don't know who was after, whatever. You don't play that well there. You go into Christmas. You come back. Anyways, you come back and you start off 8-10 play. We lose at Duquesne. UMass takes us to overtime. I had the GW scout. We only beat them by 7 or 8. We're still trying to figure out who we are. And, again, I know he wasn't 20 points a game, but he did a lot for us from a schematic standpoint. So, again, trying to reinvent and offensively, are we getting Haas touches? What are we doing? JP wasn't JP at that point. And Tay Weaver's now knocked up into a 6th, 7th man role with Gibson being out. So, again, needing people to step up. Did we ultimately navigate it as well as we possibly could? Yeah, but again, I think they're the closest team in the league that matches a little bit of what we do from a toughness standpoint. I think they're probably they would be up there in my opinion off of just pure toughness with Weathers and Hughes, and then little fella, whatever.
Sincere Carey.
And he's good. And so
Tavian Dunn-Martin.
That's what I figured I was talking about.
And
the guys who are the least that have the least conscience, the smallest conscience in the world when it comes to shooting the basketball.
This as clean as you can. Oh, normally you have a different title for him.
Oh yeah, we have a title for Tavian Dunn-Martin and Sincere Carey, but that's another story.
Yeah, but I think
they shoot whatever they want.
Yeah, and you go into Duquesne, and again, we're young at that point. That was kind of, we had a few good wins along the way. Gave Auburn a run. You're sitting at 11-2, and you're going into that thinking we got every chance to try to win the league. But we didn't really find ourselves until really, I think maybe we go to Richmond and that stretch, which we were going into, obviously for obvious reasons, very very cautious. We were very scared. Not scared is not the right word, but that was a tough stretch. You go from there, you come home and play Dayton, and you got to go to Davidson and all these things. And so again, we were still finding ourselves. I think they're a little bit of kryptonite to what we do. They had a guy who could match toughness that we couldn't obviously figure out. But again, going into it, that place is always a tough place to play. You look back on all the years we've been there, whether it's at home or at Robert Morris, that place is and give them all the credit. Keith Dermott does a heck of a job. I do. I think he does a heck of a job.
I love that pullover he wears. I have the
Yeah,
the Billiken
he's
version.
a good dude too, man. He's a good. Most of the coaches in this league, I would say all of them for the most part, but he's always been.
Except for when Hurley was coaching at Rhode Island.
I don't know him personally. I know he's got antics, but it's so funny because when you don't know somebody, and I guess I'm probably biased. I definitely am biased on this, but like if you watch Coach Ford and don't know him, he falls into the category of guys that you're like, oh, I just don't like him. Like,
oh yeah, you
don't
get
know
that.
who he is and don't hear who he talks, and I get it. Whereas like Brad Stevens doesn't have all the antics, so you think, but he could be he's not. But I'm just saying, like,
Yeah,
it's just the perception thing. You see what you see. No different than Bob Huggins. He's got that big monster, but he's one of the most genuine guys in the business. Like,
oh man, you should, again, going back to episodes we've done, the Jeff Harris interview played under Charlie Spoonhour. There were some unbelievable stories of like the friendship between Spoonhour, who is the biggest down home country Arkansas boy you'll meet, and then Bob Huggins, who's like this big scary ass. But they're like drinking buddies, and they like were close friends. But no, I think there is an air in among A10 Twitter and A10 fans that Travis Ford's not exactly their favorite coach in the league.
No, and anytime, I mean.
Well, and UMass hates him especially, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's not unwarranted. I get it. That whole situation, what people, I think, forget about that is at that time, he actually turned down a few jobs to stay there at that time. Providence had come after him, and they had upped his money and stayed there. He loved it there. They loved UMass. My aunt and their kids loved it. We enjoyed visiting there. Amherst, they enjoyed it. But there's just some jobs sometimes that, especially at that point in his career, things that happened so fast for him to go from Campbellsville, for 3 years, and then Eastern Kentucky, and you're at UMass for 5, and then all of a sudden you're at Oklahoma State and have the chance to do that at like age 36 or something. Yeah. So, I don't think he'd trade any of it, but yeah, no, UMass. But I think that's anything. I think, again, you see what you see on TV, and then naturally you come into the league and kind of rock the boat a little bit from the status quo Dayton, VCU, Rhode Island trio or whatever you want to call it. And Davidson, I guess you'd maybe throw in there a little bit too. And, we're kind of I don't know. I think people view us as the bad boys. What people don't know, though, what people don't understand is, and I hear this a lot on the road and different things, and even Dayton, I heard through the grapevine, was like wanted no parts of us. Like I know that for a fact through one of their coaches told a coach I know, like they wanted 0 parts of us on Saturday. And we knew that. I mean, they slipped away twice. We felt we should have had them. And you can do what ifs all day long. We squeezed by at LaSalle. We squeezed by our fair share at UMass at home, all these games. So you can do that. I don't like getting into it, but that shot doesn't go in with Crutcher, and you're probably in the NCAA tournament. So, but nonetheless, I think when you're kind of coming in and you're the new face, and then on top of that, they don't like that we get some pretty prominent recruits, and and I think it's easy to forget. We forget a lot of times because of what we went through in year 2 with some things that I wholeheartely think we would have had a team that would have competed for the A-10 that year. But nonetheless, we got to a point, and I give them all the credit in the world, Coach Macon, Coach Bailey, Coach Tate, to come through that situation and recover and put together a team and make an NCAA tournament. And, hopefully, we never look back. But there's always a lot of work to be done.
I, for one, am leaning into being to this Billiken heel turn in the A-10. I am full on villain mode. I am leaning right into it.
Yeah, we don't mind it. I mean, at the end of the day, you walk a fine line, I think, with it. But kind of where I was going with that is those guys and we as a staff have never once sat down from day one and been like, you know what, this is what we're recruiting. We're going to be the best. We just became that. And I think a lot of that is Jordan Goodwin and what he is. But you'll see who we are as a staff and who coach is a little bit more skill development. It's starting to tailor in the direction of, again, there will never, if you're not tough, you're not even. That's number one. But there's a mixture, and I think to take that next step, you gotta mix the two, and I think you started to see that in last year's team, and I think we had that with some guys that obviously left the program, but we had to make light of a tough situation and ended up putting 5 guys on the floor 2 years ago that we had some skills guys, but our MO was we're going to get after it on the defensive end, and that's our MO. And I think it just morphed into this. And by no means do we sit down now and say, you know what, we need to go get the biggest bruisers and this and that. Now, you better have a certain mentality to play for Coach Ford. I've always said that. If you don't have a certain, and we've got some guys coming in and so that will be interesting, and we've got some guys on this current team that have had to transition a little bit and morph into guys that can take, the type of coach that he is. Yuri Collins being one of them, from a guy who did it at the highest level. And Coach Ford, as good as Yuri is, he's got to take that next step with leadership. And Markai Strickland, I've said out loud, if his toughness and heart matches his skill level, it could be scary how good he is. But again, I think you develop, and when you're around that day in and day out, and his passion and his, again, he does every single individual workout. He does every single, practice. He is hands-on. He is, there's no passing anything off. It's him and his mentality. And so I think guys develop that. But, yeah, I think people think, oh, we went and recruited this football team of guys to do that. No, it just morphed into that. And that's who we are with Fred and Jordan and even Haas.
That's Fordham who recruits football players to play basketball.
Yeah. Seriously.
By the way, I meant to add this earlier, and I forgot to. The game after Maryville was Kansas State. So that's a really weird stretch for me, or an interesting stretch, I guess, because you take Auburn down to the wire. Then you had a game against Maryville where you had both Gibson Jimerson and Hassan French out for that game. That's a tough one. And then you go to K-State, which is your first game, your first – I'm not going to knock Maryville, but it's your first really competitive game without Gibson Jimerson, which is a weird stretch of games, but it's a nice road win.
Hassan was out Maryville too.
Yep.
He's running low on Starbucks. We better get to the last
good. But I laugh about that actually with Coach Stricker, who was the coach at Maryville at the time. I become pretty good friends with him, and it was like the perfect storm. Those dudes came in here. I give it to them. I know they didn't end up with the best record, but they came and gave us all we wanted. I promise you that. That was
I didn't enjoy that game. I'll just go on record. And
oh no, I didn't either, because I was and I'll never do that again. I downplayed. Going in staff meeting that day was talking about this would be a good game to get some guys in, and ultimately TJ Hargrove comes in and
saves the day.
Out of nowhere, saves us a little bit. But yeah, I that was not a pleasant night for me.
Well, we talked about your successes on the recruiting trail, and you were honored for that recently. I believe the NABC named you to the 30 under 30 list. Yeah. What does that honor? First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's big time.
Thank you.
What does that honor mean to you? And can you speak on it a little bit more?
Yeah, I won't talk on it too much. To me, I like I said earlier, I just don't attack things for things like that. To me, I'm able to separate. I think there's an easy ability in this business to develop an ego, to develop a sense of accomplishment. And the minute that happens, I personally, in life, not just this business, feel that that's when you've gotten comfortable. I think I'm very, very much a person that, I've been hands-on with helping get some of our GAs here, and that have dealt with that with Coach in the past 4 years. And when I talk to people and people trying to get in the business and things, I'm like, man, I'm in a great position. At this moment, I said at the same time, I could be a head coach in 5 years, or I could be asking you for a job. And that's the reality of this business. I've seen people who are at the top and they're next minute at the bottom. So the minute I feel personally, the minute you start to buy into those things and really believe in them, the work is never done. I was listening to a podcast this year in the middle of the season. Jay Wright and Chris Beard both alluded to this in podcasts. And Chris Beard was talking about making the Final Four and how 2 days after was probably one of the worst days of the year for him, for the simple fact of you spend all this time in this business trying to get to the mountaintop. You spend all whatever that is, whatever your idea of success is. Everybody has different ideas. Obviously, it's winning games, Final Fours, all these things. But you do it no different than Jay Wright was talking about. You win a national championship, and 2 days later, probably not even 2 days. I know my mind works differently. You're already thinking about what's next. Will I ever get back there? Will I ever? It is always what's next. Like, that's like my motto. It is always what's next. And so, do I celebrate that win? Do I celebrate that, commitment signing? Absolutely. You have to. You better. Because, again, 5 years from now, you can look up, especially in today's world, and be out of this thing. And so the minute you start to buy into those things, and not to say, obviously, I've talked to a number of different people that have reached out and been over the, just it brings me a lot of joy to hear from those people, and the congratulations means a lot, obviously. So I don't want to downplay it and sound like I'm, not thankful for it or anything like that. But at the same time, I just don't, to me, and I don't know if that was a panel or one person's opinion, that it's just somebody's opinion, to be honest with you. No different than, if there's somebody out there that's got a whole different opinion than me, I can promise you that. And so I take it, and you're thankful for it, but there's so much more work to be done. And that's the way I approach it always, no different than if we make a Final Four, try to figure out how to get back there. Until the day you retire, that's what it's about. And so sure, it's good to be praised for things you've done, if that's why I was put on the list or whatnot, and I appreciate it and I'm thankful. But like I said, it's one person's opinion. There's been those lists. There was a list that came out a month ago that I was telling somebody it was a disgrace. It was the top mid-major assistants, and to not have Corey Tate or Will Bailey on there is a disgrace. And I'm not knocking anybody that was on the list or anything like that, but there's some guys on there that I'm like, look, is not even a comparison as far as what those guys have been able to do here. At least one of them, I don't care, pick one or the other, but they've warranted that. And so one person's opinion, somebody obviously thought that I had done something to warrant that, and I appreciate it. But again, the minute you buy into a list, that list does nothing for me. But no, I appreciate it. I don't mean to, shed a bad light on it or anything like that. But I think those things they're interesting. They're interesting.
So
So
fun for message board morons.
No,
like
for
that.
sure, for
yeah.
sure. And again, I am not downplaying. It sounds bad or like I'm trying to downplay or not thankful. Absolutely not. I mean, yeah, that do I feel I deserve it? No, I don't. I think there's a lot of people out there. That's why I've joked. There must have been a small pool of coaches under 30 to choose from if I made it. But
That's how I feel.
nonetheless, I appreciate it.
That's how I feel about having a podcast. I don't deserve it.
So I wanted to wrap up with a little bit more of a serious question. I was going to ask this earlier, and I just decided to kick it to the end. But one of the things I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't ask this. We talked about all the crazy stuff going on in the world with COVID-19 and the pandemic. But obviously the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, give or take, whatever it's been exactly, has been a little especially crazy across the United States, across this country. The death of George Floyd and the events that have transpired since then obviously have created a lot of conversations. And I think, you can attest to this being on Twitter. You see a lot of college coaches have even been addressing it on social media and talking about the open lines of communication that they're trying to create within their athletic department on these topics. And I wondered because, from the outside looking in, I think we would all agree as fans, there is a perception that this team couldn't really get any closer if they wanted to. I mean, this is a tight-knit group of guys that loves being around each other. You can see it on the court. You see it in the post-game press conferences. They're together. Does there have to be a separate conversation from Travis Ford reaching out about that? How was he trying to address that particular issue? Because obviously it's one that's pretty close to home in St. Louis with everything that happened last week as well.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think those are things that internally we've dealt with. There's so much publicly being put out there, and just so much information. I think ultimately, we're all in different positions and have walked different, steps in our lives, and ultimately, we all got to do our own individual part in that, whatever that may be. We're all from different walks of life. We've seen different things. We've all been part of different worlds. And to say that, my world's the same as the next guy or the next guy's is the same as the next guy's is completely, you can't do it. And so do I know the hurt and pain that, Coach Tate, Coach Bailey have been through and felt in their life? No, I don't. And so I think one approach I've done is, as I told you guys earlier, if I don't know a lot about a subject, and that's not to say that I didn't grow up with just as many black friends as I did white friends, especially being around basketball and spent, played at the park and the YMCA. And I was, in what was the hood in my town a lot and have a lot of friends to this day. And you see it, but you don't really realize it until you get over. You see, and again, I don't have the answers. I don't know enough about it. I'm not knowledgeable enough about it to speak out, and be super vocal about it. I think I talked to Coach Tate and somebody else here in town last week, had coffee, and when it was all happening, and I'm just like, this is, to me personally, it's so generational, and to really get to a point to where this thing is completely equal and racism doesn't exist. And I grew up in Kentucky where there's a lot of it. There's a lot, not directly where I was, but there's towns where it is. We're generations away from it. So what can we all do from the ground level up? Again, just the way that the world is, I don't start at the same starting point that Coach Tate probably did. I don't start at the same starting point that TJ Hargrove might have, or Jordan Goodwin, or whatever. We all have different realities of where we're starting. And so I think it starts at the ground level. Again, I don't have the answers. I think, from education to teachers and pumping more into that and doing different things. But to answer your question directly, Coach, we got on, kind of in the middle of all of it, and have had numerous Zooms. We've had a all athletic staff and all the athletes got on a Zoom. Chris May had one, and we had Jonathan Smith, who's high up in the university and a prominent figure among the athletic department, is very involved, come on and speak and different things, and different coaches spoke up, different kids from different backgrounds had different things to say. And it was just, again, pushing the envelope on again, talking about it. I think it's got to be something that we all talk about. And again, it's not overnight. It's not social media posts. It's not these things. And that's I think the frustration is, at a certain point, like Coach Ford was saying, you get a little fed up with people asking how you feel. Yeah, do I feel, am I angry, all these things about it, for sure. But at the same time, I need to do a better job of stepping back and listening and seeing how prevalent it is in society. You get so wrapped up in your world, in and out, and you deal with what you've got going on, that again, there may be little moments to where you could help, whether it be, when I do our summer camps with kids, or just things. I think it starts at the foundational level. And, I hope we're not generations away. I hope we're not, but I think to fundamentally start to change the novel of it and change the thinking behind, what's going on, it starts there. And it's tough times all around. I mean, you implement that with Corona, what we're all going through just in the world, to unify at the end of the day. There's one earth. We're and so we got to get to that point, and I think we're a long ways away from it. There's going to be these things happen, but day in and day out of just listening, for me personally, listening to people's stories and what we can do. Because again, I don't have the answers.
Right.
Well, hey, thank you so much for doing this. It's been an absolute blast.
No, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. Anything else you guys had? I mean, I'm on here. I'm not in any rush. My fiance.
No, I mean,
working on wedding stuff, so I'm not trying to do that. No, I've enjoyed it. I
not anything I don't think we need to talk about for the podcast specifically, but we always do, our post show, like our, what do you call them? A debriefing in the military.
Yeah.
Again, can't thank you enough. We're excited to see where things go, with this team, hopefully this season. I think, somebody asked me today, whether I think Orlando would happen. And I said, or who said that? Where did I hear that?
We were just talking about it on the podcast, literally 2.5 hours ago.
My God, I'm having a moment. It's hot up here. The lights are, anyway. So thank you so much. And we'll let
No,
you.
I appreciate you guys. Like I said, I enjoy coming on and shedding light, and hopefully we're doing our job to make all the fans as well as you guys proud and different things, and we'll keep plugging away at it. And we appreciate the support, obviously. I think it's what makes this place special. People like you, and I'm not big into the social media world and the message boards or anything. That's a world that I choose not to dive into too much. So
As you should.
I enjoy coming on here. I'd love to do it, once a year, whatever.
Sure.
And just talk. I enjoy talking basketball and whatnot. Obviously, once we go down a rabbit hole, it's pretty tunnel vision. But no, I've enjoyed it, and we obviously appreciate you guys, and I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it.
So a big thank you, obviously, to Ford Stuen for coming on the podcast. This was special for a lot of reasons. One, I think this is the first, as Zach pointed out, this is the first current person that we've had on the podcast, someone that's directly still in the university and on the team, I guess, if you want, in the coaching staff, I'll say it that way. And it was also our first video interview. So if you guys like the video package that we've put together for this, if you like the way it was presented, if you would prefer me to keep doing this, please, like I said in the intro, let me know. Happy to keep doing it. I like this. I think it'll do really well. I think you guys will enjoy it. But if there's any, constructive criticism you have, then tell me about it. I mean, if you're just going to tell me I suck, then sure. But, any constructive criticism.
We all know we both suck.
Right. Yeah. No, we couldn't get our audio levels figured out for about 2 months. So obviously there's still some holes in our operation here, namely because I couldn't get it figured out. But, if you guys like it, let me know. If there's anything I can fix, change, edit, whatever, please feel free to let me know. Zach, anything else from you on the Ford Stuen interview?
Man, the guy's an open book. He's unbelievable. He's got all the energy you could ask for him, an assistant coach. The hustle. I don't know if there's another. I mean, this staff is full of hard workers. Tate, Bailey, Stuen, Giacoletti, and we learned how to pronounce Markai Strickland officially.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I think Peter has corrected me on that about 5 times now. I for some reason refuse to pronounce it correctly. I brain fart on my end. But to your point, I mean, I feel like if we had just hit record and just let him talk, he could have just talked for 10 hours.
Oh,
nonstop.
We could have gone until next season.
Yeah.
They would have figured out coronavirus
pretty much
by the time we finish this episode.
And to your point also, when you listen to him talk and you hear all this information, this knowledge, and this just, it doesn't stop. He just keeps going about it. You understand.
He's so hungry to learn.
Yeah, and you understand why he's been so successful on the recruiting trail, because you can just hear it. You can hear the way he's talking about it. You can hear the energy he has for recruiting in the athletic department. So it was unbelievable to hear that, to experience that. And I'm sure, based on our conversations after the podcast, that this will not be the last time he's on the show. So we look forward to hopefully being able to have him on again in the future. But anyway, thank you again to Ford Stuen for coming on the show. Thank you guys, as always, for listening. Make sure, as I talked about in the open, now we have the YouTube channel that's going to be more active. I'm going to try to put more stuff on there, maybe some clips every episode from here on out.
Don't forget the Billiken Vault.
Yeah. So we got the Billiken Vault, and then the House of Rick Built YouTube page. I'm sure that we'll change how we do that eventually or something. Who knows? But for now, House of Rick Built YouTube page. I will put all the links to that on social media. I'll put that in the bio on Twitter. I'll put that on Billikens.com. Anywhere I can put it, it'll be out there. Yes.
Billiken Vault has slew Kansas 98. Billikens beat Kansas when they're number 11, and then the infamous slew Cincinnati game 2000 Conference USA tournament when Kenyon Martin broke his knee on Justin Love's knee.
Well, there you go. So plenty to watch there. Obviously, you got this podcast to watch or listen to, however you so choose. If you listen in an audio version and that's your preferred method, I totally get it. But if you wouldn't mind just giving this a watch and just commenting your opinions, that'd be awesome. But make sure you subscribe on YouTube, Billiken Vault, House of Rick Built. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. We've got some more stuff in the works, some things that are coming that we're just not ready to announce yet. Hopefully, we can start to roll that out soon enough, but there will be more information on that as it becomes available. But as always, again, thank you guys so much. We were talking to Ford about the numbers on our show and how we're doing, and it's incredible, really, when you look at it to understand how much you guys have supported the show, how dedicated you guys are to listening to the show. Our numbers have been fantastic of late, especially during a time when there's no basketball and really, very minimal for
And
us to
nobody's
talk about.
driving anywhere.
Right. I mean, it's just it's hard for us to do as much as we obviously normally would be doing at this point in the year. But you guys have still been listening to everything we've done. Hopefully you've been enjoying it. Hopefully, take your mind off whatever's going on in the world. So we're very appreciative of that. If you haven't listened to the Beyond Cardi interview yet, go check that out. Chris Sloan, haven't listened to that yet. Go check that out. That's like 3 hours of just stories, so anyway, plenty of content out there. That's the bottom line. There's plenty of stuff out there to listen to. Make sure you check it all out. I'll put links up for all this stuff. I think I might throw a thread up on Twitter and just pin it to our profile and just have links to our different pages on all the various social media platforms and podcast platforms. There's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, and on a personal note, I just really appreciate everyone's support as far as this goes, and as far as this, meaning the podcast, and the Billiken watch along I did with Drea. I can't believe how many people actually showed up to watch that. It was a ton of fun, and the videos on the vault. This has been a tough time on everyone, this coronavirus, and I think people are forgetting or not quite realizing the anxiety that can bubble to the surface, with the fear of being sick and or getting your family sick or and that kind of thing, and it's really, this has been a therapeutic release for me. So I appreciate everyone's kind words and support in this podcasting and multimedia venture that me and Colin have entered in.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think we could say enough about the levels of support, and I'm very hopeful for what's coming up in the future. I have we've been talking about some stuff. Zach's got more watch-alongs planned. We've got some more interviews planned. We might have maybe a new show planned. I don't know entirely. I do know, but I'm not going to say. But
Jesus,
that was
just
a
get
terrible
on
way
with it.
Yeah, I know. It's a terrible way of alluding to it. But anyway, thank you guys again. I feel like I say it every episode, but say it again just one more time because it truly, I can't believe that we're here in this position. So thank you. Anyway, as always, thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time, House of Rick Built signing off.
I just chucked deuces. I'm embarrassed.